In a world where powerful sects fight endless wars for supremacy, one man chooses to remain hidden. After leaving his ancient clan, Chen awakens the mysterious Boundless Progeny system allowing him to build a secret family, raise powerful descendants, and grow stronger in the shadows. While the world chases fame and power, he quietly creates an empire no one sees coming. Welcome to Boundless Progeny, the Hidden Patriarch Boundless Progeny, the Hidden Patriarch. Chapter 1, Establishing the Hidden Branch. The afternoon sun beat down on the chaotic, bustling streets of Wang City, a small mortal hub tucked away in the Bastion province of the upper worlds. Though considered a minor city on this vast star continent, it still boasted a population of roughly 3 million people. Yet out of these millions, fewer than 10,000 possessed the rare potential or resources to become cultivators, as the local factions fiercely hoarded cultivation techniques and left the rest to crawl in the mud of the mortal realm. Through the thick crowds walked a young man with calm, unusually deep eyes. His name was Chen. To the passing mercenary or local shopkeeper, he looked like an ordinary, unremarkable traveler. No one could guess that beneath his simple linen robes lay a soul that had traveled across the stars from a distant place called Blue Star. Nor could they guess that just hours ago, Chen had formally severed his ties with the main Yi clan of the Chu state, a colossal ancient family where he had spent 30 years living as an ordinary, unbacked branch disciple. In a universe broken into 1,500 upper worlds and 1,500 lower worlds, after an ancient cataclysm with a foreign race, power struggles were brutal. Chen's parents had died during his childhood, leaving him without a backing. Realizing that staying in the main Yi clan would only pull him into a meat grinder of internal power struggles, he had utilized a clan rule to gracefully exit the lineage, taking 100 yellow spirit stones as his startup capital. He had traveled 100,000 kilometers just to reach this isolationist corner of the shattered firmament to build his own genealogy from scratch. Stopping in front of a grand courtyard estate near the quiet edge of the city, Chen met with the property broker. He handed over 500 taels of gold, a hefty sum for a mortal but a pittance to a cultivator. As the deed was signed and the broker bowed his way out, a crisp, mechanical chime echoed directly inside Chen's mind. Ding, host has successfully purchased a residence and established a formal family branch. The strongest family system is now fully activated. Boundless Progeny System initialization complete. Ding, unlocking the upgraded newbie gift pack. Congratulations, host has received a profound-grade small world 200 square kilometers featuring a 10x time dilation effect. Congratulations, host has received. The family divine tree suppresses family fortune, grants immunity to soul-searching secrets for any bound member. Chen's lips curved into a faint, satisfied smile. He closed his eyes and immediately sunk his consciousness inward. Stepping through an invisible spatial tier, his soul entered the profound-grade small world. The sight took his breath away. A massive, pristine landscape stretching across 200 square kilometers lay before him. The sky above wasn't blue, but a swirling, rich amethyst color, a visual manifestation of the intense 10x time dilation rule governing this pocket dimension. One day passing in the dangerous outside world would equal 10 full days of peaceful development inside here. At the center of a massive, crystal-clear lake stood a small island, upon which grew a magnificent, ancient tree. This was the family divine tree. Its roots ran deep into the fabric of the space, emitting a gentle, protective pulse of white light. According to the system guidelines, any individual brought into this space who possessed a loyalty or favorability rating above 60 would automatically be imprinted by the tree. Once marked, it would be physically and spiritually impossible for any outside force to extract secrets about Chen, his system, or this pocket world through brutal, soul-searching methods. Furthermore, the imprint would naturally maximize their affection and alignment with the family. 10 times the time, and absolute secrecy, Chen murmured, his eyes flashing with determination. This is the perfect foundation for a low-key life. He didn't waste a single moment. Returning to the outside world, Chen began executing the first phase of his strategy, expanding the family lineage to trigger the system's progression rewards. He navigated the streets of Wang City until he arrived at the Blossom Pavilion, a highly prestigious and powerful matrimonial matchmaking agency operating across 100 nations. To the absolute shock of the pavilion manager, this seemingly ordinary young man didn't just look for one or two companions. Chen spent 1,600 spirit stones on the spot, purchasing the contracts of all 15 available supreme yellow-grade courtesans. Dumbfounded by his staggering wealth and eager to curry favor with such a wealthy client, the manager threw in an additional 50 highly trained maids as a complimentary gift. With 65 women now under his responsibility, housing them in a minor city without drawing the prying eyes of the local city lord or passing sect scouts would be impossible. Chen didn't even try. The moment they arrived at his newly bought estate, he brought all 65 women directly into his 200-square-kilometer small world. As they stepped onto the lush grass and looked up at the amethyst sky, the gentle light of the family divine tree washed over them. Because they were rescued from a life of servitude and given a pristine paradise to live in, their favorability ratings easily bypassed the baseline threshold of 60. Instantly, the tree's invisible imprints settled into their souls, guaranteeing their absolute, unbreakable loyalty to the Yi clan. Among them, 4 standout women quickly rose to manage the household. Su Qingj, who possessed a sharp mind for logistics, Gu Zier, who maintained internal discipline and peace, Jai Jiyushin, who possessed a keen sense for external market trends, and Mu Ningxu, who had a rare, natural affinity for fire elements. "From this day forward, this world is your home," Chen announced to the gathered women. "Here, you will cultivate, live in peace, and help me build a lineage that will outlast the stars." To jumpstart their progress, Chen distributed high-grade cultivation manuals and yellow-grade pills he had acquired. Using a specialized dual cultivation technique, Chen spent the next several months of outside time, which translated to nearly 3 years inside the accelerated time dilation of the small world, deeply bonding with his inner circle. Soon, all 15 of his primary concubines were successfully pregnant. During this intensive period of isolation, the system's milestone rewards triggered, bestowing upon him the standard yellow-grade alchemist inheritance. While a lesser cultivator might have bragged or rushed out to sell high-tier items, Chen remained fiercely practical. He knew his true cultivation had secretly broken through to the powerful core formation, Kai Si realm, giving him the ability to fly at Mach speeds and dominate the region. Yet he intentionally masked his aura, publicly appearing as a weak, low-level qi refining or foundation establishment practitioner to keep anyone from viewing him as a regional threat. Inside his hidden world, Chen utilized his alchemy inheritance to refine strictly yellow-grade pills. They were highly pure, incredibly profitable, but common enough to avoid drawing the attention of powerful sect ancestors. At the same time, he used the rewarded crescent rice seeds to turn wide plains of his 200-square-kilometer space into a massive spiritual farm. Because of the 10x time dilation, the rice grew at an astonishing speed, yielding tons of premium spiritual rice in mere weeks of outside time. Working hand-in-hand with Jai Jiyushin and his head maid, Xianxia, Chen began quietly dumping the crescent rice and pure yellow-grade pills into the local markets using multi-layered proxy merchants and mortal trade networks. Millions of spirit stones began flowing into his treasury, while the name Chen remained completely invisible to the greater world. He knew the system would grant him a vast array of mystical auxiliary occupations in the future, such as talisman crafting, weapons forging, or beast taming. Chen had already decided on his blueprint. He would keep the apex lifelines, the supreme alchemy, divine wine brewing, and grand master formation inheritances, strictly for himself to remain the irreplaceable pillar of safety. The remaining crafts would be distributed to his wives, concubines, and future children based on their personal interests, creating a self-sustaining, hidden superpower right inside his pocket dimension. Everything was moving perfectly according to plan, until the outside world finally knocked on his door. One evening, Xianxia returned from a trip into the outside territories after gathering intelligence and learning advanced midwifery techniques for the upcoming births. As she crossed the threshold of the outer estate, she was supporting 2 severely injured, bleeding young women. They were twin sisters, identical in their breathtaking beauty but pale as ghosts, their clothes torn from a frantic escape. Their names were Chu Linger and Chu Yuer. "Master," Xianxia whispered urgently, her face tense. "I found them collapsed in the Black Forest just outside the county line. They are being hunted." Yi Chen's eyes narrowed as he looked at the girls. Before he could even ask, a sudden wave of heavy, oppressive spiritual pressure swept across the distant horizon of Wang City. Brilliant streaks of fiery red light illuminated the night sky, cultivators from the blazing cloud sect, a powerful regional power governed by an aggressive late-core formation ancestor. The sect was moving in force, heading directly toward the city lord's mansion to lock down the minor city gates and search every house block by block to find the escaped twins. An ordinary branch head would have panicked, either kicking the girls out or handing them over to avoid a sect's wrath. But Yi Chen merely looked toward the flashing lights in the sky, his expression entirely unbothered. "Xianxia, bring them into the small world immediately," Yi Chen commanded calmly. With a wave of his sleeve, the spatial rift opened, and the injured twins were brought straight into the hidden paradise, safely tucked away beneath the protective canopy of the family divine tree. The tree's light washed over them, completely severing their karmic signatures and energy trails from the outside universe. Sitting by their bedside inside the time-dilated world, Yi Chen looked down at the conscious, trembling sisters. "You are safe here. The blazing cloud sect cannot reach you in this space. But hear my words. You will stay here, cultivate diligently, and suppress your desires for immediate, foolish revenge. When you have broken through to the nascent soul realm under my guidance, I will personally unleash you with the full weight of my alchemical arsenal to annihilate your enemies." Hearing his deep, absolute promise, the twins wept and bowed, their loyalty instantly cementing past the threshold of 60. Meanwhile, outside in the mortal realm, the blazing cloud sect turned the small city completely upside down. Elder Xianxia personally led squads of elite disciples, deploying high-grade tracking arrays, interrogating local clans, and forcing the city lord to search every single courtyard. Yet days turned into weeks, and they found absolutely nothing. No blood trails, no residual spiritual energy, and zero witnesses. It was as if the Chu sisters had completely evaporated from the face of the shattered firmament. Standing on the roof of the city lord's mansion, Elder Xianxia's face was incredibly pale, sweat dripping down his brow. To completely vanish two people right under the nose of a core formation sect required spatial manipulation or high-tier masking techniques that only supreme, ancient factions from the core of the upper worlds could possess. "Elder, should we keep searching the eastern sectors?" a disciple asked, trembling. "No, withdraw immediately," Xianxia hissed, terror gripping his heart. A terrifying, hidden high-tier power or an invisible primordial expert must have stepped in to protect those girls. If we push any further and anger such an entity, our entire blazing cloud sect will be wiped from existence overnight. Within hours, the blazing cloud sect recalled all of its forces, fleeing back to their mountain gates in absolute phantom fear, thoroughly terrified of the invisible monster they thought they had crossed. Back in his quiet, ordinary courtyard, Yi Chen took a slow sip of tea, listening to the silence returning to the streets of Wang City. A faint, amused smile played on his lips. His enemies had retreated out of their own paranoia. His hidden weapons were safely cultivating at 10 times the speed inside his pocket world, and his low-key path to becoming the supreme alchemy emperor remained completely undisturbed. Chapter 2: The Harvest of Hidden Years. The departure of the blazing cloud sect left Wang City enveloped in a heavy, uneasy silence. Local clans whispered in hushed tones about the phantom superpower that had effortlessly erased 2 living targets from right under a core formation elder's nose, never realizing that the immortal entity they feared was currently sitting in a quiet courtyard at the edge of the city, checking the growth of his spiritual crops. Inside the stable space of the profound-grade small world, time moved with relentless, beautiful velocity. Yi Chen stood at the edge of the central lake, looking out over the sprawling green fields. Thanks to the tenfold time dilation, nearly 3 years of internal time had passed, while the outside world had barely aged 3 months. The vast landscape was no longer an empty expanse. It had been transformed into a perfectly organized agricultural empire. Fields of crescent rice stretched as far as the eye could see, their jade-colored stalks heavy with plump grains that shimmered with faint, spiritual luminescence. Nearby, specialized gardens hummed with activity as the 65 maids carefully harvested yellow-grade spiritual herbs under the strict direction of Su Qingge. "Master," a soft, melodious voice called out. Su Qingge approached, holding a jade ledger close to her chest. Her expression was filled with deep reverence, the invisible imprint of the family divine tree glowing faintly within her soul to align her heart completely with the family's future. "The third harvest of crescent rice is complete. We have successfully gathered 40 tons of premium grain. Additionally, the spiritual bee colonies we introduced to the eastern orchards have begun producing low-grade spiritual honey." "Excellent work, Qingge," Chen replied, his voice calm and steady. "Have Jiayushan divide the harvest into smaller, irregular batches. We will drip-feed them into the mortal trade markets across the surrounding 3 counties over the next 2 months. Remember, use separate mortal merchant facades. Never sell to the same supplier twice." "Understood, Master. The tracks will be completely erased." She bowed gracefully and stepped away to coordinate the logistics. Chen turned his gaze toward a distant pavilion where the soft cries of newborn infants echoed across the water. The primary purpose of his system, expanding the bloodline, had borne its first magnificent fruits. Within this accelerated 3-year period, all 15 of his primary concubines had successfully given birth. 15 healthy children, each born with vibrant cries that sent small ripples of energy through the small world's atmosphere, had officially entered the Yi clan lineage. The moment the first child was born, a series of crisp system notifications had flooded Yi Chen's mind. "Ding, the family lineage has expanded. First-generation descendants born, 15. Family fortune heavily reinforced by the family divine tree. Internal spiritual energy density increased by 15%. Congratulations, host. You have received a standard milestone reward, Fundamental Foundation Tier Formations Ledger. Congratulations, host. You have received the formula and method for Earthcore spiritual wine refining." A faint, knowing smile touched Yi Chen's lips. The rewards matched his long-term grand design. He immediately absorbed the knowledge, integrating the complex matrix of formation nodes and the delicate, temperature-sensitive fermentation processes of spiritual wine into his consciousness. As he had planned, these apex auxiliary skills, the paths of Grandmaster formations, divine wine brewing, and supreme alchemy, would remain strictly locked in his own mind. By holding the monopoly on defensive arrays, life-saving elixirs, and bottleneck-breaking pills, he ensured that he would always be the absolute, undisputed anchor of the family, shielding his children from the dangers of the upper worlds. Walking down the wooden pier, Yi Chen arrived at the isolated western valley of the small world, where a dense, protective mist hung in the air. This was the sanctuary where the Chu twins, Linger and Yuer, had been placed. 3 years of unperturbed, rich spiritual cultivation inside the pocket world, combined with the unlimited supply of high-purity yellow-grade pills Yi Chen provided, had completely transformed the broken girls he had rescued. Their hollow cheeks were now glowing with spiritual vitality, and the ragged breathing of their shattered meridians had been replaced by the steady, powerful thrum of advanced energy. As Yi Chen stepped through the mist, the 2 sisters immediately opened their eyes from their meditative states. They stood in perfect unison and knelt deeply before him, their foreheads touching the cool grass. "Linger greets the master," the elder twin murmured. "Yuer greets the master," the younger echoed. Yi Chen glanced at them, his probing system interface flashing before his eyes. Their favorability ratings had long soared past 80, deeply locking the family divine tree's absolute loyalty imprint into their souls. More impressively, their cultivation had skyrocketed. Thanks to their natural talent and his relentless pill support, both sisters had broken through the mortal threshold of qi refining, solidified their foundations, and were now firmly standing at the 7th layer of the foundation establishment realm. "You have broken through 3 layers in the past year," Yi Chen noted, his voice lacking any praise, remaining cool and demanding. "But you are still far from the nascent soul realm I required." Chu Linger raised her head, her beautiful eyes burning with a mixture of profound gratitude and a deeply suppressed, chilling intent. "Master's grace is as vast as the heavens. We do not dare to be impatient. We will suppress our hatred and grind our bones into blades until the day Master permits us to strike." Good, Yi Chen said, waving his sleeve to place 2 pristine jade bottles containing top-tier cultivation pills before them. The blazing cloud sect outside has retreated into their mountain gates, terrified of a phantom master that doesn't exist. They believe a cosmic entity took you. Continue to let them fear the dark. Focus entirely on condensing your golden cores. When your nascent souls are formed, the day the blazing cloud sect bleeds will be decided by you. We obey the master's decree. The twins chimed in unison, their hearts filled with an ironclad devotion to the man who had given them a sanctuary to grow into monsters of vengeance. Leaving the valley, Yi Chen's consciousness slipped back into his physical body, sitting in the quiet, real-world courtyard of Wang City. The outside evening air was crisp. To the rest of the city, he was just an ordinary, low-key resident who occasionally sold high-quality spiritual rice to minor mortal shops. But beneath the calm surface, his treasury was swelling with spirit stones. His family was multiplying in absolute safety, and his personal mastery over the alchemical flames was refining day by day. Let the great sects wage their wars across the 3,000 worlds. Behind the closed doors of the Yi estate, the foundation of the future Alchemy Emperor was quietly, immovably turning into steel. Chapter 3, The Architecture of Secrecy. The transition between the boundless space of the profound-grade small world and the mundane reality of Wang City was a jarring contrast that Yi Chen had long learned to navigate with absolute fluidity. Outside, in the narrow, dust-swept alleyways of the Bastion province, time crawled at a torturously slow pace. Inside, beneath the amethyst-tinted sky of his 200-square-kilometer sanctuary, generations of spiritual crops could be sown, grown, and harvested before a mortal outside could finish building a house. Yi Chen sat cross-legged on a polished block of obsidian within the central pavilion of the small world's main island. Before him floated a complex, interlocking lattice of pale silver light, the physical manifestation of the fundamental foundation-tier formations ledger he had recently acquired from the system's bloodline milestone reward. His eyes, reflecting the ethereal glow of the formation lines, tracked every node with calculated precision. Unlike standard array masters who relied on physical flags, spirit stones, and unstable runic scripts to anchor their arrays, Yi Chen's mind had been directly branded with the perfect, flawless conceptualization of the craft. With a slight flick of his finger, a sliver of his core formation, Kai Si, spiritual energy detached from his dantian, weaving seamlessly into the floating lattice. The silver light expanded, spreading outward from the central pavilion like a ripple across an undisturbed pond, descending into the very soil of the island and anchoring itself to the roots of the family divine tree. A grade 3 concealment and deflection array, Yi Chen murmured, his voice echoing softly over the quiet waters of the lake. Once layered with the natural, obscuring properties of the divine tree, even a nascent soul expert standing directly over this residence in the outside world would see nothing but ordinary dirt and mortal brick. This was the core of Yi Chen's philosophy, absolute control through layers of invisible redundancy. He would never allow a single vulnerability to exist within his sanctuary. By keeping the Grandmaster paths of formations, wine brewing, and alchemy strictly within his own hands, he ensured that no matter how large his clan grew, the foundational lifelines remained tethered to his absolute will. Master, a soft voice interrupted his thoughts. Xianxia walked gracefully up the pavilion steps, carrying a tray containing a sealed clay amphora. The clay was damp, coated in a fine layer of dark, mineral-rich earth that emitted a faint, intoxicating aroma of fermented grain, wild honey, and deep elemental heat. The first experimental batch of the Earth Core spiritual wine has completed its initial fermentation under the time-accelerated cellar, Xianxia said, lowering herself to her knees and presenting the amphora with both hands. Per your instructions, we used the high-purity crescent rice from the first harvest and the spiritual honey gathered by Mu Ningxu's flame bees. Yi Chen broke the wax seal with his thumb. Instantly, a dense, visible vapor rose from the jar, swirling in the air before settling into a thick mist. The scent alone caused the spiritual energy within his meridians to thrum with sudden, heightened vitality. He took a small sip. The liquid was like liquid fire, yet it went down with a smooth, velvety texture, exploding into pure, unadulterated spiritual energy the moment it hit his stomach. Excellent, Yi Chen praised, a rare nod of approval escaping him. The purity is high, and the medicinal properties have been completely locked into the alcohol. This earth-core spiritual wine can serve as a catalyst. For a qi refining practitioner, a single cup can shorten half a year of bitter cultivation. For a foundation establishment master, it can rapidly stabilize fractured meridians after a breakthrough. He resealed the jar and placed it inside his system space. Xianxia, expand the cellar. Dedicate 10 acres of the southern valley strictly to underground fermentation vats. We will need a vast reserve of this wine as our children begin their formal cultivation paths. I will see to it immediately, Master, Xianxia replied, her loyalty rating flashing a steady, unshakable 95 in Yi Chen's vision as she bowed and departed. Yi Chen stood up and walked toward the eastern wing of the island, where a large, open-air courtyard had been constructed. This was the nursery and training ground for the first-generation descendants of the newly established Yi clan branch. Inside the courtyard, the 15 primary concubines, including Gu Zir and Jai Jiyushin, were watching over the 15 young children who were now physically around 3 to 4 years old due to the internal time dilation, despite only a few months passing outside. These children were the true treasure of the system, their very existence anchoring the family's rising fortune. Yi Chen's eyes scanned the young boys and girls running across the grass. His system's probing function automatically overlaid their attributes over their heads. Descendant Yi Chang's first son. Aptitude, Grade 4 Spiritual Root, True Fire Affinity, Loyalty 100. Descendant Yi Zixuan first daughter. Aptitude, Grade 5 Spiritual Root, Wood Earth Affinity, Loyalty 100. Descendant Yi Qingfeng second son. Aptitude, Grade 4 Spiritual Root, Wind Affinity, Loyalty 100. A sense of profound satisfaction washed over him. Because he had consumed high-purity yellow-grade pills during his dual cultivation with his concubines, and because the children were conceived and carried within the hyperdense spiritual environment of the profound-grade small world, their baseline talent far exceeded his own original mortal roots. In the outside world of Wang City, a single child with a Grade 4 spiritual root would cause local clans to fight to the death to adopt them. Here, he had 15 of them, all possessing unshakable loyalty directly hardwired into their souls by the family divine tree. Father, little Yi Chang, noticing Yi Chen's arrival, stumbled over with short legs, his small hands clutching a wooden training sword. His eyes were wide with pure, untainted admiration. Yi Chen crouched down, ruffling the boy's hair. Chang, have you practiced the basic breathing exercises your mother taught you today? Yes, father, I can already feel a warm current moving in my belly, the boy proclaimed proudly, his small chest puffing out. Good. Remember, a high building is only as strong as its foundation, Yi Chen said softly, his voice carrying an ironclad weight that settled deeply into the child's developing mind. Never show your strength to outsiders. If you have 10 points of power, always make the world believe you only have 3. Do you understand? If I have 10, I only show 3. Yi Chang repeated, nodding solemnly as if memorizing a supreme ancestral commandment. Yi Chen smiled faintly. The indoctrination of low-key, cautious development had to begin from the cradle. He spent the next several hours guiding each child, assessing their elemental affinities and formulating their future paths. According to his strategy, he would not distribute his core inheritances. However, once the children turned 6 internally, he would begin parsing out secondary system rewards based on their natural inclinations. Yi Zixuan, with her wood-earth affinity, would eventually receive a spiritual plant cultivation inheritance to manage the crescent rice fields. Yi Chang, with his true fire affinity, would be given a weapons forging inheritance to supply the family with arms. This division of labor would allow the clan to become an independent, self-contained juggernaut, completely decoupled from the unstable resource chains of the 3,000 worlds. After settling the children, Yi Chen returned to the central pavilion and summoned Jai Jiyushin and Su Qingj. It was time to review the family's economic lifeline, the proxy trade network. Jai Jiyushin spread a large, mundane ink map of the Bastion province across the stone table. Her finger traced several black lines extending outward from Wang City like a spider's web. Master, using the 50 trained maids as our primary agents, we have established 3 independent mortal merchant caravans, Jai Jiyushin reported, her eyes sharp with business acumen. They operate under the names of the Jade Grain Guild, the Spring Source Tea House, and the Iron Ox Logistics. None of these names are legally or spiritually registered to the Yi family name. How is the distribution of the crescent rice and yellow-grade pills progressing? Yi Chen inquired, leaning back. Su Qingge took over the explanation, tapping 3 specific locations on the map, the neighboring cities of Qingyang, Highwater, and Blackstone. We have completely avoided selling our goods within Wang City to ensure the local city lord remains entirely ignorant of any massive influx of resources. Instead, our caravans transport the crescent rice disguised as ordinary mortal grains to these 3 outlying cities. Because our rice contains pure, trace spiritual energy without the impurities found in wild grain, the minor cultivation clans in those cities buy it out instantly at premium prices. And the pills? Yellow-grade blood-replenishing pills and chi-gathering pills refined by master are being drip-fed exclusively into mortal auctions and underground black markets, Jai Jiushan added. We only release 5 bottles per market every 2 weeks. This creates artificial scarcity, driving the prices up by 30% while ensuring that no major sect takes notice of a single massive supplier. To the outside world, it looks like a few lucky rogue cultivators are selling off their personal hoards. Yi Chen nodded slowly, his analytical mind checking for any flaws in the design. The accumulation of spirit stones. Our current monthly net profit has stabilized at 45,000 low-grade spirit stones, Su Qingge stated, her voice tight with excitement. Master, in just 3 months of outside time, our hidden treasury has accumulated over 130,000 spirit stones. This already matches the yearly liquid capital of a mid-tier cultivation clan. Do not let the wealth make you complacent, Yi Chen warned coldly, causing both women to straighten up instantly. To a true core formation or nascent soul sect, 100,000 spirit stones is nothing but a drop in the bucket. But to a minor city like Wang City, it is enough to cause every greedy cultivator to join forces to butcher us. Continue the current pace. Do not expand the caravans. Keep the operations fragmented and untraceable. We obey Master's commands, the 2 women bowed deeply. With the economic network operating flawlessly, Yi Chen closed his eyes and allowed his consciousness to slip out of the small world, returning to his physical frame inside the quiet, real-world study of his outside estate. The outside night was silent, save for the distant, occasional chime of the city guard's watch bells. Standing up, Yi Chen walked to the window, looking out over the dark silhouette of Wang City. To the local population, the mysterious disappearance of the Chu twins had become a cold case, a ghost story to warn aggressive disciples against overstepping their bounds. The blazing cloud sect had completely locked down its borders, entering a state of paranoid isolation. Yi Chen let out a soft breath, his hand resting on the wooden window frame. His hidden base was secure, his economic roots were expanding through the surrounding territories like subterranean vines, and his family was growing in a time-dilated paradise without a single drop of blood being spilled. Let the arrogant prodigies of the upper worlds fight for fleeting glory in the open. He would remain in the shadows, a hidden patriarch slowly weaving an invisible web across the shattered firmament. Chapter 4, The Internal Crucible. Word count generation for Chapter 4 continues below to maintain the continuous generation. The outside world moved like a frozen river, but inside the profound-grade small world, the wheels of time ground forward with relentless, life-altering speed. Another 4 years of internal time passed smoothly, bringing the total internal development of the Yi clan branch to nearly 7 years, while a mere 8 months had drifted by in the outside world of Wang City. For Yi Chen, these 4 hidden years were a period of intense, solitary refinement. Within his time-dilated alchemy chamber, the roaring crimson flames of his spiritual fire reflected off his calm, unmoving face. Before him floated his bronze cauldrons, melting rare stalks of earthcore grass and purifying the essence of crescent rice stalks into dense, gaseous clouds. With his yellow-grade alchemist inheritance completely mastered, Yi Chen's control over pill purity had reached a terrifying level of absolute perfection. Every batch of yellow-grade chi-refining pills he produced was of the flawless quality, completely devoid of the toxic pill sediment that typically clogged a cultivator's meridians and limited their future potential. Boom! A soft, muffled explosion echoed inside the cauldron as 3 round, golden pills flew out, landing perfectly inside a jade vial held in Yi Chen's hand. They emitted a dense, sweet fragrance that immediately filled the room. Ding, host has refined 1,000 flawless yellow-grade pills. Alchemy proficiency has reached the absolute peak of grade 1. Touch of the grade 2 boundary achieved. Yi Chen wiped a thin layer of sweat from his forehead, his eyes fixed on the glowing vials. He had deliberately capped his output at the yellow grade to remain low-key, but his internal technical mastery was already bordering on the profound grade. He was slowly accumulating the foundational experience needed to eventually step onto the path of the true alchemy emperor. Master, Qin Yao's voice drifted from outside the chamber. The young Master Chang and young Lady Zixuan have reached their 6th internal year. They are waiting for you in the ancestral hall. Yi Chen adjusted his robes and stepped out. Let us go. The ancestral hall was a grand, serene structure built from spiritual pine wood that naturally cleared the mind. Inside, the 15 children of the first generation stood in a neat, disciplined line. Though they were physically only 6 years old, their eyes carried a maturity and calm that far outstripped mortal children, a direct result of growing up under the spiritual guidance of Yi Chen and the protective aura of the family divine tree. Yi Chen walked up to the central dais, looking down at his progeny. Today, you take your first formal steps onto the auxiliary paths of our clan. Remember, these crafts are not for vanity or show. They are the tools that will ensure our family's survival when the sky falls. He walked down to his first son, Yi Chang. The boy stood perfectly straight, his small hands balled into fists. Chang, your affinity for fire is pure and fierce, Yi Chen said, placing his hand on the boy's head. Today I bestow upon you the high-tier weapons forging inheritance. You will learn to shape iron, temper steel, and craft the armor that will shield your siblings. Do you accept? Chang will never disappoint, father, the boy declared, his eyes flashing with sudden, deep, fiery runes as the system-delivered knowledge poured directly into his soul. Yi Chen then moved to his first daughter, Yi Zixuan. Zixuan, your soul is gentle and deeply attuned to the earth and wood elements. Today, I bestow upon you the supreme spiritual agriculture inheritance. You will take over the management of the crescent rice fields and ensure our family's food supply remains eternal. Zixuan thanks father, the young girl bowed elegantly, a soft, green glow settling into her eyes as the agricultural insights integrated into her mind. One by one, Yi Chen distributed the secondary inheritances to his children based on their personal attributes. Some received talisman crafting, others received beast taming, and a few were given pill-assisting techniques to eventually act as helpers in his grand alchemy chambers. By dividing the labor this way, the children felt deeply valued and connected to the clan's growth, while Yi Chen safely maintained his absolute monopoly over the supreme paths of alchemy, wine brewing, and formations. With the children's paths set, Yi Chen walked toward the Western Valley to inspect his ultimate hidden weapons, the Chu twins. The mist in the valley was thicker now, swirling with sharp, biting spiritual pressure. Inside the cave, Chu Linger and Chu Yuer sat opposite each other, a massive spiritual vortex spinning directly above their heads as they drew the dense energy of the small world into their dantians. 7 years of continuous, uninterrupted cultivation inside the small world, backed by Yi Chen's endless supply of flawless yellow-grade pills and earthcore spiritual wine, had completely remolded their destinies. Come! A twin golden light erupted from their bodies as their auras underwent a qualitative transformation. The bottleneck that held them back cracked and shattered like glass. Their energy expanded outward, causing the cavern walls to shake before being completely absorbed back into their bodies. They had formally broken through to the peak of the core formation, Kai-Si realm. Opening their eyes, the twins immediately stood up and fell to their knees before Yi Chen, who had been quietly watching from the shadows. Master, we have achieved the peak core formation realm, Chu Linger reported, her voice trembling with intense emotion. We are only one step away from condensing our nascent souls. Yi Chen looked down at them, his face unreadable. Peak core formation is enough to dominate this minor Wang city, but to the blazing cloud sect, you are merely matching their old ancestors' strength. If you go out now, you might kill a few elders, but you will ultimately die or be captured again. Chu Yuer bit her lip, her hands clenching the fabric of her robes. Master, the hatred in our hearts burns daily, but we will obey your decree. We will not take a single step outside until our nascent souls are fully formed. Good, Chen said softly, throwing a thick jade scroll to them. This is the Twin Lotus Soul Linking Array. It is a high-tier formation I extracted. When the two of you fight together using this array, your combined power can suppress an ordinary early-stage nascent soul cultivator even while you are still at the core formation realm. Practice it until it becomes second nature. The sisters clutched the scroll as if it were holy scripture. Thank you, Master. We swear our lives to the Yi clan. Chen nodded and withdrew his consciousness from the pocket dimension. Returning to the physical world, he stood up from his desk and walked out into the courtyard of his outside residence. The morning sun was just rising over Wang City, casting a golden hue over the quiet streets. To the 3 million residents here, the small Loki-Yi estate was just another peaceful household of a wealthy merchant. Nobody knew that beneath this ordinary soil lay a time-dilated crucible containing 15 hyper-talented children, a massive agricultural engine generating millions of stones, and 2 peak core formation killers waiting to be unleashed like starving hounds. Chen breathed in the fresh morning air, a cold, calculated glint in his eyes. The internal crucible was burning perfectly. Soon, it would be time to expand his shadow further across the province. Chapter 5, The Wind Stirs in Bastion. The peace that Chen so deeply cherished was never a permanent state in the upper worlds. It was merely the quiet space between 2 storms. While the Yi clan branch quietly accumulated strength within the time-dilated pocket dimension, the political landscape of the Bastion province began to shift like shifting sands. In the outside world, a full year had passed since Chen first established his branch in Wang City. Inside the small world, an incredible 10 years had drifted by, bringing the total internal development time of his clan to a staggering 7 years for the first generation of children, who were now physically and mentally entering their preteen years of intensive training. Chen sat in the study of his outside estate, listening to a detailed report from Xianxia and Jiayushan. The 2 women had just returned from the provincial capital, their expressions unusually serious. Master, the balance of power within the Bastion province is cracking, Jiayushan said, pointing to a new, highly detailed political map of the region. The Blazing Cloud sect, after their failed hunt for the Chu twins a year ago, has remained strictly isolated. However, their longtime rival, the Iron Blood Fortress, has interpreted this isolation as a sign of weakness. Chen took a slow sip of tea, his face remaining entirely expressionless. Has a war broken out? Not yet, but the skirmishes along the border have intensified, Xianxia explained. The Iron Blood Fortress has recently allied with the Myriad Beast Pavilion. Together, they are pressuring all the independent minor cities and merchant guilds within the province to choose a side. Wang City is directly in their path of expansion. Chen's eyes narrowed slightly. A regional war will disrupt our proxy trade networks. How are our caravans being affected? The Iron Ox Logistics and the Jade Grain Guild have already been stopped twice by Iron Blood Fortress scouts along the northern trade routes, Jiayushan said, her tone laced with frustration. They demanded a 30% war tax on our crescent rice shipments. To maintain our Loki profile, our agents paid the fee and withdrew. But if this continues, our supply lines to the outlying cities will be completely strangled. Chen tapped his fingers rhythmically against the wooden table. For a Loki patriarch, a regional war was the worst-case scenario, not because he feared the local factions, but because chaotic conflicts brought wandering high-level experts, unpredictable investigations, and forced conscription of local warriors. If the city lord of Wang City was forced to draft men for the war, Chen's quiet estate would inevitably draw unwanted attention. We cannot allow outside chaos to breach our walls, Chen said coldly. Jiayushan, immediately halt all high-volume grain shipments to the northern territories. Shift our proxy operations entirely to the southern sea routes. It is better to make less profit than to expose our distribution network to war scouts. Understood, Master, Jiayushan bowed. Xianxia, prepare the estate's external arrays, Chen ordered further. I will personally layer a grade 4 vast illusion and spirit-locking array around the perimeter of this outside residence. To any passing scout or spiritual consciousness, this house must appear completely empty, cursed, or completely devoid of any spiritual energy values. I will prepare the formation anchors right away, Xianxia replied. With the external adjustments arranged, Chen immediately entered the profound-grade small world to check on his family's internal readiness. The moment he stepped into the pocket dimension, he was greeted by the rhythmic, heavy sound of metal striking iron echoing from the eastern valley. He walked over to find his first son, Cheng, who was now physically an adolescent of 16 years due to the internal timeline. The boy's torso was bare, covered in sweat, his muscles tightly defined as he swung a massive heavy hammer down onto a glowing block of spiritual iron. Beside him, several younger siblings were operating the bellows, their faces flushed with the heat of the forge. Chen used his probe function. Descendant Cheng, Cultivation, 9th layer of Qi refining, craft grade 2 weaponsmith, loyalty 100. Father, Cheng stopped his hammer instantly upon seeing Chen, wiping the sweat from his eyes and bowing deeply. You are close to breaking through to the Foundation establishment realm, Cheng, Chen noted, inspecting the sword the boy had been forging. The blade was sharp, infused with trace fire element runes that increased its cutting power. Your smithing has improved, but your heart is slightly restless. Why? Cheng bit his lip, looking down at his hammer. Father, I can feel the spiritual energy in the air shifting. My mothers have told me about the outside world, about the wars across the 3,000 worlds. I want to forge weapons that can protect our family if those enemies ever find this place. Chen placed a firm hand on his son's shoulder. Your desire to protect the clan is noble, but remember our first law: darkness is our greatest shield. The strongest weapon you can forge is not one that kills 1,000 enemies in the light, but one that ensures we are never discovered in the dark. Focus on refining defensive armor and concealment talismans for your siblings. Chang understands. I will adjust the forge formulas immediately, the boy declared, his restlessness instantly evaporating, replaced by a renewed, disciplined focus. Chen then visited the central lake, where Xianxia was overseeing a massive fleet of wooden boats loading sacks of crescent rice. At 16 years old internally, she had grown into an elegant, deeply mature young woman who managed the entire agricultural output of the 200-square-kilometer space with flawless efficiency. Father, Xianxia greeted him with a soft bow. The southern fields have been completely transitioned to cultivate the earth core spirit herbs you requested for the wine brewing. We have also hoarded over 300 tons of crescent rice within the system's storage spaces, completely insulated from the outside war. You have done well, Xianxia, Chen praised softly. The outside world is entering a period of chaos. Our family's food reserves are our ultimate leverage. Keep the production steady and ensure that not a single grain is wasted. I swear to protect our stores with my life, Father, she replied smoothly. As Chen walked back to the central pavilion, his gaze drifted toward the western valley, where the Chu twins were entering the absolute final phase of their retreat. The spiritual vortex above their cave had turned almost solid, a dense sphere of purple energy that crackled with latent lightning. They were on the absolute verge of condensing their nascent souls. Chen looked back up at the swirling amethyst sky of his pocket world. The wind was stirring outside, and the flames of regional war were approaching the gates of Wang City. But within this hidden world, his roots had already grown too deep to be torn out by minor regional sects. Let the Iron Blood Fortress and the Blazing Cloud sect tear each other apart. When the smoke cleared, the Yi clan would still be standing in the dark, larger, wealthier, and entirely untouched. Chapter 6: The Shadow over Wang City. The storm that had been brewing along the provincial borders of the Bastion province finally breached the gates of Wang City exactly 9 months after Chen established his hidden branch. To the minor mortal population and the few local cultivators, the arrival of the war was an unavoidable catastrophe. But to Chen, it was merely an operational variable that needed to be calculated and neutralized. In the physical world, the morning air was thick with the scent of burning wood and iron. A massive detachment of heavily armored warriors riding on giant, two-headed war-wolves had surrounded the northern gates of Wang City. These were the vanguard forces of the Iron Blood Fortress, a brutal military sect that specialized in physical body tempering and aggressive territorial conquest. Chen stood in the crowded central plaza of Wang City, his aura completely masked down to the 3rd layer of Qi refining, appearing as nothing more than a terrified, low-level guard. Around him, Thousands of citizens were gathered in panic as the local city lord, a sweating, mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivator, stood trembling before the Iron Blood Fortress Vanguard commander. The commander, a burly giant standing over 2 meters tall with a cultivation at the peak of the Foundation establishment realm, slammed his massive halberd onto the stone stage, causing the ground to crack. By the decree of the fortress master, Wang City is now a conscription territory of the Iron Blood Alliance, the commander roared, his voice infused with spiritual energy that rattled the ears of the mortals. Every clan, merchant guild, and independent household must surrender half their liquid spirit stones, and all men between the ages of 16 and 40 to join the vanguard labor battalions. Anyone who hides resources or resists conscription will have their entire lineage executed on the spot. A collective wail rose from the crowd. To be drafted into a vanguard labor battalion was a functional death sentence. They were used as human shields to trigger sect formations and exhaust the spiritual energy of rival defensive arrays. Chen stood silently in the crowd, his eyes cold and detached. His physical body was currently 32 years old in this life, placing him squarely within the conscription bracket. Furthermore, his large courtyard estate near the city edge would inevitably be targeted by the sect's asset seizure squads. Using brute force to gather cannon fodder, Chen thought, a faint, dangerous glint flashing across his eyes. Arrogant, short-sighted, and incredibly disruptive to my peace. He quietly melted back into the shadows of the panicked crowd, returning to his estate before the sect's enforcers could begin their house-to-house raids. The moment he crossed the threshold of his outside residence, Qin Yao and Lian closed the heavy wooden gates behind him, their faces tense. "Master, the asset seizure squads are already moving through the western district," Qin Yao reported urgently. "They will reach our street within the hour. Should we activate the vast illusion array and completely erase the house from their vision?" "No," Chen replied calmly, walking into the study. An entire estate suddenly vanishing in a small city of 3 million would instantly trigger the spiritual consciousness of the Iron Blood Fortress's core formation elders, who are undoubtedly monitoring the region from the skies. It would invite a full-scale investigation. "Then, do we let them draft you master?" Lian asked, her hands clenching in worry. "Let them draft me," Chen let out a soft, dry laugh. "A lion does not allow a dog to dictate its path. We will use a proxy." With a wave of his hand, Chen opened the spatial rift to the profound-grade small world and stepped inside. He walked directly to the western valley where the Chu twins were resting. The moment he entered the cave, he felt a profound, qualitative change in the atmosphere. The heavy, volatile spiritual vortex was gone. Instead, Chu Linger and Chu Yuer sat side by side, their bodies floating 6 inches off the ground, surrounded by a serene, terrifying aura that felt entirely weightless yet infinitely heavy. They had done it. 10 years of internal acceleration had allowed them to break through the final mortal bottleneck. They had successfully condensed their nascent souls. Opening their eyes, the twins drifted down to the ground and knelt before Chen, their expressions filled with absolute religious devotion. "Master," Chu Linger whispered, her voice carrying a faint, ethereal echo. "Our souls have taken form. We are ready to execute your will." Chen looked down at them, his probing system confirming their stable early-stage nascent soul status. "The outside world has brought trouble to our doorstep. The Iron Blood Fortress is pressuring Wang City, demanding conscription and resource seizure. I need a distraction that will force them to completely abandon this region." "What is your decree, Master?" Chu Yuer asked, a chilling blade of spiritual intent flashing in her eyes. "The Iron Blood Fortress Vanguard camp is located 5 kilometers north of the city gates," Chen explained, his voice entirely devoid of emotion. "They have accumulated a large hoard of seized resources from the surrounding villages. The 2 of you will utilize the twin Lotus Soul linking array I gave you. Mask your identities, infiltrate their camp tonight, and slaughter their command structure. Leave no survivors, and leave a signature that points directly to the Blazing Cloud sect." The twins' eyes lit up with sudden, vicious joy. To frame the Blazing Cloud sect while slaughtering their enemies was the perfect outlet for their years of suppressed hatred. "We will paint the camp in their colors, Master," Chu Linger smiled, a beautiful yet terrifying sight. Go, do not leave a single soul alive to testify, Chen commanded. That night, beneath the cover of a moonless outside sky, two shadows slipped out from the spatial rift of the Yi estate, completely bypassing the city guards. 5 kilometers north, the Iron Blood Fortress Vanguard camp was a roaring hive of drunken laughter and clanking armor. The Vanguard commander was sitting in the central tent, admiring a chest of seized low-grade spirit stones, completely unaware that the space around his camp had suddenly been sealed by an invisible, double-layered barrier. SHHH. A soft, tearing sound cut through the night air. Before the guards at the perimeter could even raise their weapons, a torrent of crimson, phantom lotus petals drifted down from the sky. Every petal was a condensed blade of nascent soul's spiritual intent. The slaughter was silent, precise, and absolute. Using the twin lotus soul linking array, Chu Linger and Chu Yuer moved through the camp like twin goddesses of death. The Foundation establishment commander didn't even have time to activate his defensive talisman before Chu Linger's hand pierced cleanly through his chest, crushing his heart instantly. Within 30 minutes, all 400 elite warriors of the Iron Blood Fortress Vanguard were dead. Before leaving, Chu Yuer used a high-tier fire talisman, burning the central tents with a distinct, blazing cloud element signature that belonged exclusively to the cultivation methods of the Blazing Cloud sect. The next morning, Wang City woke up to absolute chaos. The asset seizure squads never arrived at Yi Chen Street. Instead, the surviving forces of the Iron Blood Fortress in the region retreated in a state of absolute panic, terrified by the sudden ambush from their main rival sect. Sitting in his study, Yi Chen calmly poured himself a cup of earth-core spiritual wine, listening to the frantic shouting of the retreating soldiers outside his walls. His face remained a mask of perfect, undisturbed serenity. The shadow had passed over Wang City without touching a single brick of his estate. His hidden weapons had proven their edge, his secret stayed safe, and his low-key development toward the apex of the 3,000 worlds continued completely uninterrupted. Chapter 7. The Alchemy of Abundance. The sudden, brutal annihilation of the Iron Blood Fortress Vanguard camp sent shockwaves throughout the entire Bastion province. Just as Yi Chen had calculated, the fortress leadership assumed the attack was a calculated, preemptive strike by the Blazing Cloud sect, completely shifting the focus of the war away from Wang City and toward the main sect borders. The conscription orders were cancelled, the asset seizure squads were recalled to the front lines, and the minor city of 3 million was left in a temporary pocket of peace. Inside the profound grade small world, another 3 years of time-dilated isolation ground forward. For the Yi clan branch, this period marked a major transition. The first generation of children had reached their late teens internally, and their specialized training was beginning to yield massive returns for the clan's internal economy. Yi Chen stood inside the primary refinement hall of the central island. The hall had been significantly expanded. It was now a massive complex filled with rows of smaller bronze cauldrons, all linked by subterranean vents to a controlled earth-core fire array that Yi Chen had personally designed using his Grandmaster formation insights. Operating these smaller cauldrons were 5 of his younger children, their faces focused as they carefully maintained the flame temperatures under the watchful guidance of Mu Ningxu. Yi Chen walked down the row, his eyes assessing their movements. With his yellow-grade alchemist inheritance completely mastered, he had begun training his descendants as alchemy assistants. They were not permitted to know the supreme formulas or high-tier refinement methods, but they were perfectly capable of pre-purifying raw spiritual herbs and handling the bulk melting of basic ingredients. "Father," Yi Chen said, approaching from the adjoining forging wing. The young man was now physically 19 years old internally, his frame tall, broad-shouldered, and radiating the stable spiritual energy of a newly advanced first-layer foundation establishment practitioner. "Have you completed the protective array anchors I requested, Change?" Yi Chen asked, without turning around. "Yes, Father. I have successfully forged 48 Grade 2 spirit-absorbing iron spikes," Yi Chen reported, presenting a spatial bag with deep respect. "Every spike has been infused with fire-resistant runes. They are ready to be deployed as the foundation anchors for the new concealment barriers around our agricultural fields." "You have done well," Yi Chen said, taking the bag. "Your smithing has reached the stable Grade 2 level, But remember, do not become arrogant. A grade 2 smith is merely a novice in the grand scheme of the upper worlds. Continue to refine your control over the hammer. Chang will keep father's words locked in his heart. The young man bowed deeply and returned to the forge. Chen then walked out toward the central lake, where a massive flotilla of wooden barges was docking at the main island's piers. Standing on the lead barge was Xianxia, her hair tied back, her green robes fluttering in the artificial wind of the small world. At 19 years old internally, she had completely taken over the role of chief agricultural officer of the clan. "Father," Xianxia greeted him, her eyes bright with a sense of immense accomplishment. "The macro transition of the northern plains is complete. Thanks to the supreme spiritual agriculture inheritance you bestowed, I have optimized the soil nutrients using the residue from the alchemy chambers. This year's harvest of crescent rice has reached an all-time high of 120 tons. 120 tons of high-grade spiritual rice. In the outside world, such an abundance of pristine, impurity-free grain could easily sustain a mid-sized sect for a decade or purchase a minor city outright." "The quality?" Chen asked, his voice calm. "Every grain is of the top-tier yellow grade, completely free of mortal toxins," she replied proudly. "Furthermore, the southern valleys have yielded their first full harvest of earthcore spirit herbs. We have accumulated enough raw ingredients to brew over 10,000 jars of the earthcore spiritual wine." "Good, store 80% of the grain within the system's insulated space," Chen ordered. "The remaining 20% will be processed by Jai Jiushin's proxy caravans. With the regional war shifting toward the main sect borders, the price of spiritual food in the outlying provinces has tripled. We will capitalize on this scarcity, but remember our rule: fragment the sales, never flood a single market." "Xianxia understands," she bowed gracefully. That evening, Chen sat alone in the central pavilion, reviewing his family's total accumulated wealth. Through his system's internal ledger, he could see the numbers clearly. Yi Clan hidden branch assets, liquid spirit stones, 480,000 low-grade stones, spiritual rice reserves, 350 tons insulated storage, flawless yellow-grade pills, 8,500 vials, earthcore spiritual wine, 2,400 jars. This accumulation of wealth was staggering for a family branch that had only existed for less than a year in outside time. He had built an economic powerhouse that operated entirely in the dark, completely shielded from the taxes, wars, and greed of the 3,000 worlds. However, Chen knew that wealth without matching power was nothing but a beautiful illusion. He closed his eyes and checked his internal danshan. His own cultivation, nurtured by the flawless pills and the high-tier spiritual wine he kept for himself, had stabilized at the peak of the core formation, Kai Si, realm, moving dangerously close to the legendary nascent soul threshold. The regional war outside will eventually end, Chen thought, looking out over the peaceful lake. Whichever sect wins, whether it is the Iron Blood Fortress or the Blazing Cloud sect, they will inevitably seek to consolidate their control over minor cities like Wang City. Before that day arrives, my family must possess the power to make them break their teeth if they ever dare to knock on our gates. With a thought, his consciousness returned to his physical body in the physical world. The night over Wang City was quiet, the distant sounds of patrolling guards the only reminder of the fragile peace. Chen stood up, a cold, unyielding determination in his heart. The alchemy of abundance was complete. Now it was time to prepare the formations of absolute defense. Chapter 8, The Threshold of the Soul. A year and a half had dissolved into the grand timeline of the upper worlds since Chen first arrived in Wang City. To the minor cultivators of the Bastion province, this year and a half was a bloody nightmare of continuous warfare between the Blazing Cloud sect and the Iron Blood Fortress. But inside the profound grade small world, a magnificent 15 years of accelerated time had passed smoothly, bringing the total internal development time of the Yi Clan branch to an incredible 15 years. The first generation of children were no longer adolescents. They were now physically and mentally mature adults in their mid-20s, their foundations solid, their loyalty unshakable, and their specialized skills deeply integrated into the clan's daily operations. Chen sat in absolute isolation within the deepest subterranean chamber of the small world's central island. The room was sealed by a triple-layered grade 4 spirit isolation and law-gathering array. For the past 5 internal years, Chen had completely handed over the daily management of the pocket world to Qin Yao, Su Qingge, and his eldest children, focusing entirely on his own cultivation path. In his hands, he held a massive jade amphora containing 20-year-old earth-core spiritual wine, which he had fermented using rare cosmic herbs extracted from the system's milestone rewards. He took a deep draught of the crimson liquid. Instantly, a violent, roaring wave of pure, condensed spiritual energy exploded within his dantian. His golden core, spinning at a terrifying speed that exceeded Mach 10, began to glow with a blinding white light. Ding, host has reached the absolute limit of the core formation realm. The tribulation of the soul is approaching, preparing to break through to the nascent soul realm. Chen's face remained a mask of absolute, icy calm. He did not rush. He guided the roaring spiritual torrent through his 36 primary meridians, purifying the energy again and again until it was as dense as liquid mercury. Crack! A soft, internal sound echoed within his soul. His golden core, which had been tempered for decades across his past life, and this one, suddenly developed fine, golden fractures. A brilliant, ethereal light burst from the cracks as the core completely dissolved, transforming into a pure pool of spiritual origin. From that pool, a tiny, translucent figure slowly rose. The figure looked exactly like a miniature version of Chen, its eyes closed, its small hands folded in a meditative mudra. The nascent soul had been successfully formed. Boom! A massive, invisible shockwave of spiritual pressure erupted from Chen's body, slamming against the grade 4 defensive arrays of the chamber, causing the solid stone walls to groan under the stress. His lifespan, which had been capped at 500 years at the Kai-Si realm, cracked and expanded violently, surging upward toward the legendary 800-year mark. His sensory consciousness expanded exponentially, rushing out of the subterranean chamber, covering the entire 200-square-kilometer small world, and tracking every blade of grass, every grain of crescent rice, and every heartbeat of his descendants with absolute, godlike clarity. Opening his eyes, a deep, silver light flashed within Chen's pupils before fading back into absolute normalcy. He stood up, his movements entirely weightless, his aura completely integrated with the natural laws of the space. He had formally stepped into the rank of a nascent soul, Purple Mansion Master. In a minor province like Bastion, a nascent soul expert was an absolute ancestor, a legendary entity capable of establishing a high-tier sect that could dictate the fate of millions of lives. Yet, Chen's first thought upon achieving this godlike power was not glory, but further concealment. System, completely mask my cultivation down to the 5th layer of the Foundation establishment realm, Chen commanded mentally. Ding, cultivation masking active. External aura adjusted to 5th layer Foundation establishment. Satisfied, Chen stepped out of the isolation chamber and walked toward the central ancestral hall. The moment he arrived, he found his 15 children and his concubines already waiting, their faces filled with deep awe and reverence. Even though Chen had masked his aura, the natural, instinctual reverence hardwired into their souls by the family divine tree allowed them to feel that their patriarch had undergone a supreme transformation. Chen looked down at his eldest son, Xianxia, who was now a mature, powerful man at the peak of the Foundation establishment realm, his body radiating the dense heat of a master weapons smith. Beside him stood Xianxia, her aura equally stable, surrounded by a faint, green vitality that indicated her profound mastery over spiritual agriculture. Father, the children knelt in perfect unison, their voices echoing off the pine walls. Rise, Chen said softly, his voice carrying an ethereal resonance that cleared their minds. During my isolation, how is the outside world progressing? Jijiushin stepped forward, her expression grave. Master, the regional war has reached its bloody conclusion. 3 months ago in outside time, the Blazing Cloud sect's old ancestor was ambushed and severely wounded by the combined forces of the Iron Blood Fortress and the Myriad Beast Pavilion. The Blazing Cloud sect has been completely dismantled, their territories seized. Chen's eyes remained calm, and the victors. The Iron Blood Fortress has declared themselves the absolute rulers of the Bastion province, Jai Jiyushin explained, her finger tapping the map. They have already begun establishing military garrisons in every independent city. Their main integration squad is currently marching toward Wang City to permanently displace the local city lord and establish a direct fortress tax bureau. A cold smile touched Chen's lips. The dog had finally beaten the other dog, and now it was coming to clean up the yard. They survived the distraction of the Chu twins, but they have grown too greedy, Chen thought softly. They want to tax my territory. They want to disturb my peace. He turned his gaze toward the western valley, where Chu Linger and Chu Yuer stood waiting in the shadows, their eyes burning with a silent, lethal hunger. With his own breakthrough to the nascent soul realm, his total strategic options had expanded exponentially. He was no longer just a hidden rabbit hiding in a hole. He was a sleeping dragon, and the Iron Blood Fortress was about to step directly onto his claws. Chapter 9, The Fortress Tax Bureau. The arrival of the Iron Blood Fortress Integration Squad transformed the fragile peace of Wang City into a cold, militarized regime within days. The local city lord, realizing he stood absolutely no chance against a sect that had just annihilated the blazing Cloud sect, surrendered his keys without firing a single spiritual arrow, retreating into a forced retirement. In the center of the city's commercial district, a grand, stone estate was violently seized and converted into the direct fortress tax bureau. Massive, blood-red banners bearing the iron fist insignia of the fortress hung from the walls, guarded by rows of heavily armored body-tempering warriors. Chen sat by the window of an ordinary tea house across the street, quietly sipping a cup of low-grade mortal green tea. His aura was perfectly suppressed to the third layer of qi refining, making him blend seamlessly with the terrified local merchants around him. Beside him sat Qin Yao, disguised as a modest merchant's assistant. Her eyes were fixed on the front gates of the tax bureau, where a large wooden board had just been pinned. "Master," Qin Yao whispered, her voice barely audible over the chatter of the tea house. "They have posted the new commercial edict. Every independent merchant, resident property owner, and local clan must register their assets within 3 days. The new tax rate has been set at 40% of all monthly revenue, payable exclusively in low-grade spirit stones or raw spiritual materials." Chen looked at the board, his expression a mask of perfect indifference. 40%. They are not taxing the city. They are bleeding it dry to recover the resources they expended during their war with the blazing Cloud sect. Our proxy caravans, the Jade Grain Guild and the Spring Source Tea House, have already received direct summonses to present their ledgers at the bureau tomorrow morning, Qin Yao added, her eyes flashing with a hidden, dangerous light. If we present our true ledgers, our wealth will be exposed. If we fake them, their core formation investigation elders will easily detect the spiritual discrepancies using their tracking arrays. Chen set his teacup down with a soft, precise click. Then we will ensure that the tax bureau ceases to function before tomorrow morning. Qin Yao's breath caught slightly, a sudden wave of excitement washing over her. "Master, do we unleash the twins?" "No," Chen replied calmly, standing up and leaving a few mortal coins on the table. "The twins' methods are too distinct. Using them again would allow the Iron Blood Fortress to connect the dots back to a hidden master in Wang City. This time we will use a formation." That night, a dense, unnatural fog rolled in from the surrounding mountains, enveloping the stone structures of Wang City in a thick gray shroud. To the ordinary citizens and the patrolling fortress soldiers, it looked like a standard seasonal mist. However, beneath the cover of the fog, an invisible shadow was moving across the rooftops surrounding the Fortress Tax Bureau. It was Chen. In his hands, he held the 48 Grade 2 spirit-absorbing iron spikes that his son Yichang had forged, along with 4 massive, Grade 4 obsidian core anchors he had personally refined inside his small world. Moving with the weightless speed of a nascent soul master, Chen bypassed the perimeter guards without triggering a single rustle of wind. He drove the iron spikes deep into the stone foundations of the surrounding buildings, connecting them through an invisible network of his own pure, liquid spiritual energy. At the 4 cardinal points around the tax bureau, he buried the Grade 4 obsidian anchors, linking them directly to a forbidden array script he had extracted from the system. the Earth Fiend Core Melting Formation. This was a Grade 4 lethal array. Once activated, it didn't attack from the outside. Instead, it reversed the local Earth ley lines, causing the spiritual energy within a specific perimeter to implode, turning the solid stone foundations into a localized, superheated gravity well that would swallow everything into the subterranean depths. Standing on the roof of a high pavilion overlooking the tax bureau, Chen completed the final madra. His silver pupils flared in the dark. "Collapse," he whispered softly. "Come." There was no loud explosion, no spectacular display of elemental fire. Instead, a deep, subaudible vibration shook the ground within a 50-meter radius of the tax bureau. The air inside the perimeter turned red-hot as the defensive arrays of the bureau were instantly starved of spiritual energy, their nodes snapping like dried twigs under the sudden leyline reversal. Inside the building, the fortress tax director, a mid-stage core formation master, suddenly opened his eyes from his meditation, terror gripping his soul. He tried to leap into the air to fly, but a terrifying, mountain-like gravitational force slammed down on his shoulders, pinning him to the floor. What expert is attacking?" he screamed, his bones cracking under the pressure. He received no answer. The solid stone walls of the tax bureau began to liquefy, collapsing inward like a house of cards falling into a sinkhole. Within 3 minutes, the entire grand estate, along with the tax directors, the elite squads, and all the seized records, was swallowed clean into a 100-meter-deep fissure of boiling subterranean magma. The moment the building disappeared, the earth closed back up with a dull thud, leaving nothing but a flat, charred expanse of empty dirt where the Grand Bureau had stood just moments before. Chen pulled his hand back into his sleeve, his aura instantly dissolving back into absolute nothingness as he stepped back into the spatial rift, returning to his small world. The next morning, Wang City woke up to a sight that drove absolute terror into the hearts of every resident and remaining fortress soldier. A major direct bureau of a victorious provincial sect had been cleanly erased from the face of the earth overnight, without a single explosion or alarm being raised. The surviving fortress scouts stood around the empty, charred dirt lot, their bodies trembling. They didn't even dare to investigate. To cleanly melt a core formation master and an entire fortress garrison into the earth ley lines required a grandmaster of formations, an entity that usually only existed within the supreme holy grounds or the ancient celestial courts of the higher realms. By noon, the remaining Iron Blood fortress forces in Wang City completely abandoned their posts, fleeing back to their provincial capital in a state of absolute psychological collapse. Sitting in his peaceful small world, watching his children cultivate beneath the amethyst sky, Chen calmly poured himself a fresh cup of earth-core spiritual wine. The tax bureau was gone, his proxy caravans were safe, and his family's absolute secrecy remained completely unbreached. The shadow had tried to take a bite out of his peace, but it had only found an invisible abyss. Chapter 10, The Merchant's Gambit. The total collapse of the Iron Blood Fortress's tax authority in Wang City created a sudden, highly lucrative vacuum across the economic landscapes of the Bastion province. Terrified by the invisible Leyline Grandmaster, who had cleanly devoured their garrison, the fortress leadership completely abandoned their aggressive taxation policies in the outlying counties, retreating into a defensive posture to protect their main sect borders. Inside the profound grade small world, another 3 years of uninterrupted time-dilated peace ground forward. For the Yi clan branch, this period marked the beginning of Phase 3 of Yi Chen's grand strategy, the Merchant's Gambit. Yi Chen sat within the central pavilion, watching his first daughter, Yi Zixuan, present a series of newly refined spiritual samples. At 22 years old internally, Zixuan radiated the elegant, deeply grounded aura of a master spiritual agriculturist, her grade 5 wood-earth root perfectly integrated with the supreme spiritual agriculture inheritance he had given her. "Father," Yi Zixuan said, presenting 3 beautifully crafted jade boxes. "Thanks to the optimized soil formulas and the 10x time dilation, we have successfully diversified our crops. Inside these boxes are the first successful cultivations of Grade 2 Jade Blood Ginseng and Grade 2 Snow Lotus stalks." Yi Chen opened the boxes, his analytical eye assessing the medicinal purity. "The spiritual retention is 95%. You have done exceptionally well, Zixuan." These herbs are the core ingredients required to refine Grade 2 spirit-condensing pills, the exact medicine needed by Foundation establishment cultivators to break through their minor bottlenecks. We have already established 3 hidden underground greenhouses in the western sector, Xianxia added, her face bright with determination. We can produce up to 500 pounds of these rare herbs every 3 internal months. Good. Hand the raw harvests over to Xianxia, Chen commanded, turning to his third concubine, who was sitting beside them with a complex financial ledger. Xianxia, how is the deployment of our new commercial facades progressing? Xianxia smiled, her eyes sharp with calculating intelligence. Master, we have completely dissolved our old mortal caravans, the Jade Grain Guild and the Spring Source Tea House, to ensure no one can connect them to the events at the old tax bureau. In their place, we have established a single unified entity, the Unseen Pavilion. The Unseen Pavilion, Chen raised an eyebrow. Yes, Master, Xianxia explained, spreading a new economic chart. We have registered it through a series of completely brainwashed mortal proxies, whose memories have been safely sealed by the family Divine Tree's imprint. The Unseen Pavilion does not possess a single physical storefront in the entire province. Instead, it operates entirely as an underground wholesale supplier, selling bulk quantities of crescent rice, Grade 2 herbs, and pure yellow-grade pills directly to the independent merchant guilds of the upper continents. Chen nodded slowly, his mind instantly grasping the strategic brilliance of the design. A supplier facade. By avoiding retail storefronts, we eliminate the need for physical properties that can be raided, taxed, or monitored by local sects. We remain completely invisible, while the merchant guilds handle all the transport risks and legal compliance for us. Exactly, Master, Xianxia said proudly. Our net income has skyrocketed. This month alone, the Unseen Pavilion has cleared 120,000 low-grade spirit stones. Our hidden treasury now holds over 900,000 spirit stones, along with 3,000 mid-grade spirit stones we managed to exchange through the upper continent trade channels. Wealth is flowing in, but our internal strength must scale accordingly, Chen noted, his voice carrying an ironclad seriousness that cut through their excitement. Change, step forward. From the shadows of the pavilion, Chen stepped into the light. At 22 years old internally, his frame was massive, his body radiating the dense, crushing spiritual energy of a fifth-layer Foundation establishment practitioner. His hands were calloused from the forge, and his eyes carried the sharp, unyielding glint of an expert smith. Father, the young man knelt deeply. Have you integrated the high-tier weapons forging inheritance into the family's defense network? Chen inquired. Yes, Father, Chen reported, pulling out a beautifully detailed blueprint. I have successfully forged 60 sets of black iron spirit armor for our maids and guards. Every set has been layered with defensive talismans that can withstand a full-strength strike from a peak Foundation establishment master. Furthermore, my younger siblings in the auxiliary smithies have mass-produced over 3,000 runic arrows infused with fire element core liquids. Chen inspected the armor sample Chang presented. The craftsmanship was clean, durable, and completely optimized for hidden combat. You have done well, Chang. A family must always be armed in the dark, even if we pray we never have to draw the sword in the light. I will continue to refine our arsenal daily, Father. The young man swore, his loyalty burning at a permanent 100 in Chen's vision. With the economic and defensive engines operating at peak efficiency, Chen closed his eyes and allowed his consciousness to return to his physical body in the outside world. Standing in the quiet study of his outside estate in Wang City, Chen looked down at his hands, where a small, dark purple flame was dancing over his fingers. The earth core fire he had recently refined to the peak level using his upgraded alchemy insights. With nearly 1 million spirit stones in his pocket world, a fully weaponized family lineage, and his own power standing firmly at the nascent soul realm, the small city of Wang City had officially become too small to contain his shadow. The merchant's gambit was set. Soon, the Unseen Pavilion would extend its invisible fingers into the core continents of the upper worlds, pulling in the massive resources required to eventually elevate the Yi clan into an eternal, unshakable dynasty. Chapter 11, The Gathering of Shadows. The transition of the Unseen Pavilion from a local regional supplier into an intercontinental trade entity, attracted the attention of forces far greater than the minor provincial sects of the Bastion province. While Chen remained strictly low-key within his ordinary estate in Wang City, the sheer volume of high-purity resources his family was injecting into the market began to cause ripples across the deeper layers of the shattered firmament. In the physical world, a full 2 years had passed since Chen first arrived in the city. Inside the profound grade small world, an incredible 20 hidden years had dissolved into the timeline, bringing the total internal age of the first generation of children to 25. They were now a tier of highly advanced, deeply disciplined cultivators who formed the iron core of the hidden clan. Chen sat within his time-dilated cultivation chamber, his hands moving in a blur of complex madras as he monitored a large, floating sphere of molten crimson liquid inside his primary cauldron. He was refining his first batch of Grade 3 Profound Soul elixirs, a high-tier medicine that required absolute mastery over the internal fire laws, accessible only to true nascent soul masters. The crimson liquid condensed into 5 round, translucent purple pills that flew out of the cauldron, landing perfectly inside a jade jar held by Xianxia, who was standing by his side. Ding, host has successfully refined 5 Grade 3 Profound Soul elixirs. Alchemy proficiency has formally crossed into the Grade 3 master level. Chen wiped his hands with a clean cloth, his eyes calm. Crossed into the Grade 3 level. I am slowly building the foundational pillars required to eventually claim the throne of the Alchemy Emperor. Master, Xianxia said, her face filled with deep respect as she sealed the jade jar. Xianxia has just returned from the central trading continent of the upper worlds. She has brought urgent intelligence regarding the Unseen Pavilion's latest distribution. Chen stepped out of the alchemy chamber and walked into the central pavilion, where Xianxia was already waiting, her expression unusually tense. Master, our shadow trade has run into a wall, Xianxia reported, spreading a map that detailed the core trading continents of the upper 1,500 worlds. The sheer purity of our flawless yellow-grade pills and the massive volume of our top-tier crescent rice have disrupted the monopoly of the Heavenly Gates Commerce Guild, one of the 3 transcontinental merchant conglomerates backed by the ancient sacred grounds of the upper realms. Chen took a slow sip of Earthcore spiritual wine, his face remaining entirely expressionless. Have they tracked our proxies? Not yet, thanks to the brainwashing seals of the family divine tree, Xianxia explained, her tone laced with worry. However, the Heavenly Gates Commerce Guild has deployed a squad of Grade 3 Fate investigators to the Bastion province. They have deduced that the source of the Unseen Pavilion's goods originates from a minor city within this sector. They are currently setting up a large-scale spiritual search net across the surrounding 3,000 miles to track the residual spatial signatures of our transport bags. Chen's eyes narrowed slightly, a cold, dangerous light flashing within his silver pupils. A Grade 3 Fate investigator was an expert who specialized in divination, karma tracking, and spatial reconstruction. If they allowed these investigators to deploy their search net, even with his advanced concealment arrays, the frequent spatial openings of his pocket world could eventually leave a trace of spiritual distortion that could draw unwanted eyes. They want to trace my karma, Chen let out a soft, chilling breath, arrogant and incredibly foolish. He turned his gaze toward the western valley where the Chu twins were resting. Linger Yuer stepped forward. From the shadows, the twin sisters stepped into the light. At 25 years old internally, they had completely integrated their early-stage nascent soul cultivation, their movements weightless, their bodies radiating a serene yet terrifying sharpness that felt like 2 unsheathed immortal blades. Master, Chu Linger knelt deeply, her eyes burning with unyielding devotion. The Heavenly Gates Commerce Guild has sent 3 Grade 3 Fate investigators to the province, Chen explained, his voice entirely devoid of emotion. They are currently staying at the grand estate of the Highwater City Lord, 60 miles north of here. Tomorrow morning, they intend to activate their search net. What is your decree, Master? Chu Yuer asked, a chilling blade of intent flashing in her eyes. You will utilize the Twin Lotus Soul Linking Array along with these 2 Grade 3 soul-severing talismans I have refined, Chen said, handing over 2 dark purple scrolls. Infiltrate the Highwater City Lord's estate tonight. Erase the 3 investigators and the entire City Lord's inner council. Leave no souls alive to reincarnate, and leave a signature that points directly to the Gorgon Shadow sect, a notorious demonic faction from the lower continents. The twins' lips curved into a beautiful, lethal smile. Framing a demonic sect while erasing a threat to their patriarch's peace was their absolute specialty. "We will cut their karma strings clean, Master," Chulinger promised. That night, beneath the cover of an ominous outside storm, the twins stepped through the spatial rift, disappearing into the dark rain. 60 miles north, the grand estate of the Highwater City Lord was heavily guarded by layers of defensive arrays. Inside the central hall, 3 elderly investigators dressed in star-patterned robes were floating over a large bronze compass, chanting complex divination mantras to prepare their search net for the morning. SHHH. A silent tear split the space directly above the compass. Before the investigators could even raise their heads, a massive torrent of purple, phantom lotus petals burst from the rift, completely shredding the bronze compass into dust. "Enemy attack!" one investigator managed to scream, but his voice was violently cut short as Chulinger's hand, infused with the pure liquid power of a nascent soul master, pierced cleanly through his forehead, shattering his soul instantly. At the same time, Chu Yuer unleashed the soul-severing talisman. A dense wave of black, corrosive demonic energy flooded the entire estate, completely overriding the local arrays and melting the bodies and souls of the guards, and the city Lord into pools of toxic sludge, leaving behind the unmistakable, rotting signature of the Gorgon Shadow sect. Within 20 minutes, the entire command structure of Highwater City and the Sacred Grounds investigators were dead. The next morning, the entire upper world trading circle was plunged into absolute terror. The sudden, brutal massacre of a Sacred Grounds investigation team by a notorious demonic faction suggested that a hidden, massive shadow war was brewing between the orthodox Sacred Grounds and the hidden demonic councils. The Heavenly Gates Commerce Guild immediately canceled their search net orders, recalling all their remaining provincial agents to reinforce their main continental headquarters. Sitting in his quiet small world, watching his children perfect their forged armor under the amethyst sky, Chen calmly poured himself a fresh cup of earth-core spiritual wine. The investigators were gone, the Sacred Grounds were chasing a phantom demonic enemy, and his family's absolute sanctuary remained completely unbreached. The world outside could burn in chaos, but within his walls, the foundation of the future Alchemy Emperor remained entirely untouched. Chapter 12, The Grand Blueprint. The panic caused by the phantom, demonic shadow war allowed the unseen pavilion to permanently solidify its trade network across the core continents of the upper worlds without any further interference from the great commercial guilds. Terrified of drawing the prying eyes of the Gorgon Shadow sect, rival merchants completely stopped investigating the mysterious supplier from the Bastion province, choosing instead to quietly buy up the flawless resources at whatever prices Jijiushan demanded. Inside the profound grade small world, another 3 years of uninterrupted, time-dilated peace ground forward. For the Yi clan branch, this period marked a monumental milestone. The first generation of descendants had reached 28 years old internally, and the clan's total population was entering its second generation of rapid expansion. Chen sat within the central ancestral hall, his newly advanced mid-stage nascent soul cultivation radiating an invisible, godlike pressure that caused the air inside the hall to hum with dense, golden particles of spiritual law. Before him stood his 15 children, all grown into powerful, mature adults who formed the absolute backbone of the hidden dynasty. Chen's eyes scanned their attributes, his probe function flashing rapid data. Descendant Yi Chang, Cultivation 9th Layer Foundation Establishment, Smithing Grade 3 Master Smith. Loyalty 100. Descendant Yi Zixuan, Cultivation 8th Layer Foundation Establishment, Agriculture Grade 3 Master Agriculturist, Loyalty 100. Descendant Yi Qingfeng, Cultivation 8th Layer Foundation Establishment, Talisman Crafting Grade 3 Master, Loyalty 100. A sense of profound pride washed over him. Every single one of his 15 children had successfully achieved the late layers of the Foundation establishment realm, their foundations flawlessly polished by the unlimited supply of flawless pills and earthcore wine he had provided. More importantly, their mastery over their secondary inheritances had reached the master tier, completely automating the clan's internal economy. "My children," Yi Chen's voice carried an ethereal resonance that settled into their souls. "For 28 years internally, our family has hidden in the dark, accumulating strength, wealth, and wisdom. Today, our hidden treasury holds over 3 million low-grade spirit stones and 50,000 high-grade stones. We possess the resources to buy an entire micro-kingdom." The children knelt in perfect unison, their eyes burning with intense devotion. "All glory belongs to the Patriarch. But wealth without a grand blueprint is nothing but a golden target," Yi Chen continued, waving his hand to project a massive, holographic map of the entire shattered firmament across the hall. "Our current 200-square-kilometer small world is safe, but as the second generation of your own children begins to be born, we will require more space, higher-tier laws, and a permanent anchor that can eventually bridge our family into the immortal and celestial realms." Yi Chang raised his head, his face solemn. "Father, what is your grand design?" "Phase 4, the grand blueprint," Yi Chen announced, pointing to the absolute center of the upper world's map, the Ethelgard star continent, a massive, high-energy realm where the laws of space and time were 10 times denser than this minor bastion province. "We will utilize the massive capital generated by the unseen pavilion to quietly purchase an ancient, abandoned spiritual leyline valley within the Ethelgard continent. We will register it under a fake, minor cultivation family identity." "And then," Yi Zixuan inquired, her eyes wide with intelligence. "Once the valley is secured, Yi Chang and Yi Qingfeng will lead a team of our brainwashed proxies to personally deploy a multi-layered Grade 5 primal chaos concealment array around the entire valley," Yi Chen explained, his eyes flashing with a cold, calculated brilliance. "We will link that external valley directly to our internal small world through a permanent, two-way spatial teleportation gate. That valley will serve as our family's physical anchor in the core world, a false front that will allow our descendants to safely enter the high-tier testing grounds without ever exposing our true sanctuary here in Wang City." The children's hearts hammered with excitement. Their father wasn't just building a hidden clan. He was weaving an invisible, multi-dimensional empire that would span across the core of the 3,000 worlds while remaining completely untouchable in the shadows. "We will execute the layout perfectly, father," Yi Chang swore, his hammer-calloused hands clenching in determination. "Jai Jiyushin, allocate 2 million low-grade spirit stones strictly for the purchase of the Ethelgard Valley," Yi Chen ordered. "Qin Yao, prepare the spatial anchoring runes. I will personally refine the core of the teleportation gate using my Grandmaster formation insights." "We obey your decrees, Patriarch," the entire hall shouted in unison. With the grand layout set in motion, Yi Chen closed his eyes and allowed his consciousness to return to his physical body in the physical world. Standing by the window of his outside study in Wang City, looking out over the quiet, mundane streets where mortal merchants were packing up their stalls for the night, Yi Chen let out a soft, satisfied breath. A full 2.5 years had passed since he first arrived in this minor city with nothing but 100 yellow spirit stones. Now his invisible fingers were reaching into the absolute center of the upper worlds, setting the pieces for a grand, cosmic chess game that the ancient sacred grounds wouldn't even realize they were playing until it was already over. Let the arrogant sects fight for fleeting titles in the light. The hidden patriarch of the Yi clan was slowly, immovably rewriting the laws of survival across the shattered firmament. Chapter 13, The Anchor of Ethelgard. The execution of Phase 4 moved with the silent, flawless precision of a clockwork mechanism. While the outside world of Wang City remained completely unchanged, a minor merchant facade belonging to the unseen pavilion successfully purchased the Silent Lotus Valley, a massive, 3,000-acre expanse of rugged, mountainous terrain located along the remote southern edge of the prime Ethelgard star continent. To the local continental authorities, the buyers were merely the Lin family, a minor, unremarkable cultivation clan fleeing from a collapsed lower world who had spent their entire ancestral savings to buy a piece of depleted continental land. No one paid them any attention. Inside the profound grade small world, another 3 years of accelerated time ground forward. For the Yi clan branch, these 3 hidden years were dedicated entirely to the construction of the permanent spatial bridge. Chen stood before a massive, 10-meter-tall archway carved from pure, Grade 4 spatial rift stone at the center of the small world's main island. The stone surface was covered in thousands of dense, silver runic scripts that pulsed with a deep, rhythmic vibration, mirroring the heartbeat of the space itself. Beside him, Yi Chang'e and Yi Qingfeng were sweating profusely, their hands maintaining a continuous output of spiritual fire to temper the final iron links that anchored the archway to the bedrock of the island. Father, the external anchors in the Silent Lotus Valley have been successfully driven into the leyline nodes, Yi Qingfeng reported, wiping his brow. At 31 years old internally, his face carried the calm, calculating maturity of a master talisman crafter. My squads have finished layering the Grade 5 Primal Chaos concealment array around the valley's perimeter. From the outside, the entire valley looks like a barren, toxic wasteland of jagged rock. Good, Yi Chen replied, his voice carrying the immense, crushing weight of his peak nascent soul cultivation. Over the past 3 internal years, his own power had reached the absolute apex of the realm, standing just a single step away from the legendary soul formation threshold. Step back. I will personally open the passage. The children withdrew to a safe distance. Yi Chen stepped forward, his eyes turning into 2 pools of pure, liquid silver light. He raised both hands, his fingers forming a series of complex spatial madras that caused the space around his arms to fracture into visible black lines. Connect, he commanded softly. Boom! A silent, spatial explosion rocked the center of the island. The empty space within the stone archway violently twisted, turning into a swirling vortex of deep purple and silver light. A dense, unimaginably rich torrent of continental spiritual energy instantly rushed through the vortex from the other side, causing the small world's energy density to surge upward by a full 20% in a matter of seconds. The permanent bridge to the Ethelgard star continent was officially open. Ding, family branch has successfully established a permanent anchor in a prime upper continent. Family fortune immensely reinforced. The portable small world has expanded from 200 square kilometers to 1,000 square kilometers. Time dilation rule optimized. Internal energy density increased by 50%. Yi Chen looked out over the rapidly expanding horizons of his pocket world. The borders of the space were violently pushing outward, turning the distant mist into rolling green hills, wide rivers, and dense spiritual forests. The 1,000 square kilometer space was now a true microrealm, capable of easily sustaining a population of millions in absolute self-sufficiency. Chang'e, Zixuan, lead the 2nd generation into the expanded sectors, Yi Chen ordered calmly. Establish the new spiritual rice plains and construction zones. Our family's 2nd generation has reached over 80 children. They will need separate training grounds to begin their chi refining paths. We obey your commands, Patriarch, the children shouted, their faces filled with absolute, religious awe as they witnessed their father expand the world with a single sentence. With the internal realm stabilized, Yi Chen stepped through the silver vortex, his body momentarily dissolving before rematerializing inside a dark, cavernous stone hall deep within the Silent Lotus Valley of the Ethelgard continent. Waiting for him inside the cavern were the Chu twins, Linger and Yuer, who had been stationed there to guard the external gate. Master, the twins knelt in perfect unison, their mid-stage nascent soul auras perfectly suppressed beneath the masks Yi Chen had refined for them. Has there been any movement from the local continental sects? Yi Chen inquired, walking out toward the hidden exit of the cavern. None, Master, Chu Linger reported. The local sects are currently focused entirely on the upcoming Ethelgard Primordial Trial, a massive tournament held once every 50 years by the ancient sacred grounds to select elite disciples from across the 3,000 worlds. Every minor family and sect is frantically preparing their young geniuses to participate. Yi Chen stood at the hidden mouth of the cave, looking out over the jagged, illusion-covered peaks of the Silent Lotus Valley. The air of this prime continent was thick with ancient laws, far superior to the depleted environment of the Bastion province. A tournament of geniuses, Yi Chen let out a soft, dry laugh. The perfect meat grinder for arrogant sects to expose their talents and collect enemies. Our family will not participate in such vanity. But Master, Chu Yuer said softly, the reward for the top 10 participants includes a direct pass to enter the Immortal Realm's secret treasury, a forbidden zone containing primordial herb seeds and lost alchemical formulas that are entirely extinct in the 3,000 worlds. Yi Chen's eyes narrowed slightly, a cold, calculated interest flashing within his pupils. Extinct alchemical formulas and primordial herb seeds. To a path that targeted the throne of the Alchemy Emperor, those resources were far more valuable than millions of spirit stones. We will not participate openly, Yi Chen said coldly, his mind instantly formulating a new strategy. But we will participate as shadows. We will use a fully controlled proxy clone to enter the trial, claim the rewards in the dark, and disappear back into the silent Lotus Valley before the sacred grounds even realize who took the prize. With a thought, his consciousness slipped back through the vortex, returning to his physical frame in the physical world of Wang City. Standing in his quiet study, looking out over the mundane mortal streets, Yi Chen's face remained a mask of perfect, undisturbed serenity. The anchor was dropped, the vortex was secure, and the Hidden Patriarch was about to play his first hand against the ancient masters of the Prime Continents. Chapter 14, The Proxy Clone Technique. The decision to target the Immortal Realm's secret treasury required a level of operational security that far exceeded any of Yi Chen's previous layouts. To enter a tournament monitored by the ancient sacred grounds and star sovereigns of the celestial realm without exposing the Yi clan's existence, he could not send his children, his concubines, or even the Chu twins. He needed an entity that possessed no past, no karma, and no bloodline trace. Inside the expanded 1,000 square kilometer small world, another 3 years of time-dilated isolation ground forward. For Yi Chen, these 3 hidden years were dedicated entirely to mastering a high-tier forbidden craft he had extracted from his latest system milestone reward, the Great Primordial Mirror Clone Technique. Yi Chen sat within the central alchemy palace, surrounded by 4 massive arrays that pulled the condensed earth and wood laws of the expanded space directly into a single central point. Floating in the air before him was a human-sized block of grade 5,000-year divine lotus root, a rare, semi-sentient material he had purchased through the unseen pavilion's highest upper continental trade channels at the cost of over 800,000 low-grade spirit stones. His hands moved in a blur of blinding speed, throwing hundreds of complex soul-splitting madras into the lotus root. Purge! Yi Chen bit his tongue, spitting a stream of his own pure, liquid essence blood onto the root, followed by a tiny, severed sliver of his own peak nascent soul consciousness. The pain was excruciating, causing his brow to furrow, but his mind remained as cold and unyielding as granite. The divine lotus root violently absorbed the blood and soul sliver, its white fibers twisting, expanding, and reshaping themselves into a human skeleton, followed by meridians, flesh, and skin. Within 6 hours, the light faded, and a young man who looked exactly like a 20-year-old version of Yi Chen stood quietly before him. The clone's eyes were blank, completely devoid of personal ego, operating entirely as an extension of Yi Chen's main consciousness. Yi Chen used his probing system to check the creation. Proxy entity, clone 0. Cultivation, first layer nascent soul, perfect foundation. Karma, absolute null, no past, no lineage connection. Loyalty, 100. A cold, satisfied smile touched Yi Chen's lips. Because the clone was formed from the 1,000-year divine lotus root and his own pure origin energy, it possessed a perfect, flawless cultivation base without any of the minor flaws or meridian scars common to natural cultivators. More importantly, because its karma was a blank slate, even a star sovereign from the celestial realm attempting to divine its past would see nothing but a smooth, impenetrable mirror. From this day forward, your name is Mu Chen, Yi Chen commanded mentally. A rogue cultivator from the northern wastes, an independent genius seeking a path into the alchemy sacred grounds. The clone's eyes instantly lit up with a deep, simulated intelligence. He bowed deeply. Mu Chen greets the Patriarch. Yi Chen waved his sleeve, throwing a silver spatial bag and a dark bronze cauldron to the clone. Inside this bag are 300 flawless yellow-grade pills and 50 custom-forged defensive talismans that Yi Chen refined. You will step through the spatial gate into the silent Lotus Valley, travel to the continental capital of Ethelgard, and register for the primordial trial under the rogue alchemist bracket. I obey the decree, Chen replied, his voice carrying the exact calm, detached cadence of Chen himself. He turned and stepped through the silver vortex, disappearing into the prime continents. With the proxy deployed, Chen walked out of the Alchemy Palace to inspect the clan's internal readiness. The 1,000-square-kilometer small world was thriving. The second generation of children, now numbering over 80 boys and girls, were running through the time-dilated training fields, their voices echoing across the green hills under the guidance of Yi Chang and Yi Zixuan. Father, Yi Chang said, approaching from the weapons smithy complex. At 34 years old internally, he had successfully broken through to the first layer of the core formation, Kai Si, realm, his aura broad, hot, and heavy. The mass production of the Grade 3 concealment talismans is complete. Every member of the second generation has been equipped with a passive ward that hides their true spiritual roots from any internal testing arrays. Good work, Chang, Yi Chen said, inspecting his son's stable golden core. Your breakthrough is clean, but remember the Kai Si realm is merely the beginning of true cultivation in the upper worlds. Do not allow your smithing to distract you from your daily meridian refining. Chang will never lose focus, father, the young man swore. That evening, Yi Chen returned to his physical body, inside the quiet study of his outside estate in Wang City. The physical world was dark and silent, a sharp contrast to the bustling, hyper-accelerated empire inside his pocket world. Sitting at his desk, Yi Chen closed his eyes and linked his consciousness directly to the sensory feed of Chen, who had just arrived at the colossal continental capital of Ethelgard. Through the clone's eyes, Yi Chen saw city walls that stretched miles into the sky, carved from pure spirit stones and guarded by rows of core formation soldiers. Floating palaces drifted through the clouds, and thousands of young geniuses from the top sects of the 3,000 worlds were crowding the streets, laughing, bragging, and flaunting their titles. Yi Chen let out a soft, silent breath from his physical body in Wang City. Let those prodigies shout their names to the heavens. His proxy shadow was already standing among them, a silent blade waiting to slice away the ultimate prize of the sacred grounds, while the Hidden Patriarch remained completely invisible 300,000 miles away in a minor mortal house. Chapter 15. The Primordial Trial begins. The continental capital of the Ethelgard star continent was a roaring crucible of cosmic ambition as the day of the Ethelgard Primordial Trial finally arrived. Over 10,000 young geniuses, elite young masters, and hidden disciples from the top sects of the upper 1,500 worlds had gathered within the central astral plaza, a colossal arena carved from a single floating moon fragment that hovered directly beneath the clouds. Monitoring the arena from the floating golden palaces above were 7 grand elders from the sacred ground of the 9 heavens, their spiritual consciousnesses sweeping across the crowd like heavy, mountain-like weights. Standing quietly in the dense crowd of the rogue alchemist bracket was Chen, Yi Chen's proxy clone. His aura was perfectly adjusted to the third layer of foundation establishment, appearing as an unremarkable, impoverished young practitioner from a collapsed family. Through the clone's sensory feed, Yi Chen sat comfortably in his physical study back in Wang City, experiencing the entire event with absolute clarity while completely insulated from any physical danger. The first stage of the trial, the crucible of purity, a grand elder's voice boomed from the clouds, rattling the stone tiles of the arena. Every alchemist has been provided with an identical bronze cauldron and 3 sets of raw ingredients for the Grade 2 spirit condensing pill. You have 2 hours. Only those who refine a pill with a purity rating above 80% will advance to the core rounds. The crowd erupted into frantic activity. Thousands of young alchemists immediately unleashed their personal flames, some using volcanic earth core fires, others flaunting rare, multicolored spiritual fires they had purchased with their sect's wealth. Chen didn't rush. He calmly sat before his basic cauldron, his hands moving with an fluid, mechanical grace that lacked any of the flashy showmanship of the sect prodigies. He unleashed a standard, pale crimson spiritual fire, the most common, low-tier flame used by novice alchemists. Look at that rogue practitioner, a young master from the Blazing Sun sect laughed from an adjoining platform, his hands controlling a brilliant golden flame. Using a basic mortal spirit fire to refine continental herbs, he will be lucky if his cauldron doesn't explode within 10 minutes. Chen completely ignored the mockery. Inside his mind, the absolute, flawless precision of Chen's supreme alchemy inheritance took over. He didn't look at the fire with his eyes. He felt the atomic structure of the herbs through his soul sliver. He adjusted the temperature down to the exact microdegree required to strip away the plant impurities without damaging the fragile medicine core. While the sect geniuses were sweating, shouting, and frantically managing their unstable high-tier flames, Chen's cauldron remained as silent and cool as winter stone. Click! Exactly 45 minutes into the trial, long before anyone else had even finished melting their ingredients, Chen gently tapped the side of his bronze cauldron. The lid flew open, and a single pristine round pill drifted out, landing perfectly inside a wooden dish. The pill did not emit a massive, flashy pillar of light, nor did it cause any dramatic elemental thunder. It was perfectly smooth, bearing 3 fine, silver runic rings around its center, the unmistakable signature of flawless quality. The inspection elder walked down the row, carelessly glancing at the rogue alchemist's dishes until he stopped before Chen's platform. The elder's eyes casually drifted to the wooden dish, and then his entire body froze as if hit by lightning. This is... The elder's hands trembled as he picked up the pill with a silver tweezer, his voice cracking over the arena's communication array. Spirit condensing pill, purity rating 99%, flawless grade, 3 runic rings. The entire astral plaza fell into a dead, suffocating silence. The young master from the Blazing Sun sect choked on his own spiritual energy, his golden flame violently flickering out as he stared at the rogue practitioner in absolute disbelief. A purity of 99% was an achievement that usually only old, 1,000-year-old alchemy saints could produce after months of careful isolation. Yet an unknown rogue youth had brewed it in 45 minutes using a basic novice fire. In the golden palaces above, the grand elders of the sacred ground opened their eyes, their heavy spiritual sights locking directly onto Chen. They tried to scan his past, to trace his lineage, to divine which hidden master had trained this monster. But their tracking nets found absolutely nothing. The clone's karma was a smooth, impenetrable mirror of absolute nullity. To their divination, he appeared exactly as he claimed, a blank slate rogue youth who had simply stumbled upon an ancient alchemical insight in the northern wastes. A natural-born seed of the Tao, a grand elder murmured from the clouds, his eyes burning with greed to recruit this talent. A flawless soul without any cause-and-effect attachments to the lower worlds. 300,000 miles away, sitting in his quiet, ordinary study in Wang City, Chen took a slow, amused sip of earth-core spiritual wine. The trap was sprung. The sacred grounds had taken the bait hook, line, and sinker, and his clone was about to glide cleanly into the core rounds to claim the immortal treasury without leaving a single drop of ink on the Yi family name. Chapter 16, The Secret Treasury Seizure. The advance of Chen through the final rounds of the Ethelgard primordial trial was a clean, undisputed slaughter of the continental prodigies, egos. Whether the sacred grounds demanded the refinement of complex grade 3 poisons or the identification of ancient, mutated spiritual roots, the proxy clone executed every task with the mechanical, flawless perfection of Chen's integrated inheritances. When the final bell chimed across the astral plaza, the rogue practitioner stood firmly at the absolute first place of the alchemist bracket, completely eclipsing the elite young masters of the sacred grounds. As the top participant, Chen was granted the ultimate prize, a 12-hour solo access pass to enter the immortal realm's secret treasury, a massive, floating spatial fragment anchored directly above the continental capital that contained ancient resources untouched for 10,000 years. Through the clone's sensory connection, Chen's main soul stood before the grand, golden gates of the secret treasury. The gates slowly ground open, revealing a vast, labyrinthine interior filled with floating jade shelves, ancient stone cases, and fields of frozen spiritual soil where extinct primeval plants were kept in a state of suspended animation. "You have 12 hours," the sacred ground enforcer warned coldly from outside the gate. "You may select 3 items from the shelves. If you attempt to touch more or smuggle resources within hidden spatial pockets, the treasury's defensive arrays will instantly disintegrate your soul." Chen understands, the clone replied smoothly, stepping through the gates as they locked behind him. The moment he was inside, completely isolated from the eyes of the Grand Elders, the blank expression on the clone's face dissolved, replaced by the sharp, calculated grin of Chen himself. 3 items, Chen thought through the clone, his eyes scanning the vast wealth. The sacred grounds are truly stingy, but they underestimate the rules of my system. Chen didn't walk toward the shelves containing powerful weapons or high-grade defensive armors. He walked directly to the rear agricultural sector, where rows of ancient stone jars were sealed with divine wax. These jars contained the primary prizes he targeted: the ancestral seeds of the primordial 9-leaf fire lotus and the complete formula ledger of the Grade 4 Soul Ascension elixir, both entirely extinct across the 3,000 worlds. He carefully picked up the 3 permitted items, setting them on a stone table. This satisfied the external tracking arrays of the treasury. Then, utilizing the hidden spatial connection hardwired into the clone's soul sliver, Chen didn't use a spatial bag. He opened a microscopic, invisible pinprick tier leading directly into the 1,000 square kilometer profound grade small world. Moving with absolute, silent speed, he didn't steal physical items from the shelves. Instead, he used a small jade blade to cut minor, unnoticeable clippings from the roots of the extinct primeval plants floating in the suspended fields. He took minor scrapings of ancient pill residue from the ancient cauldrons and collected small vials of the high-energy immortal leyline water that was used to feed the sector. To the treasury's automated defensive arrays, the physical items on the shelves remained entirely untouched, their weight, mass, and energy values completely unchanged. But to Chen's small world, a massive stream of extinct genetic material, ancient formulas, and primordial nutrients was being quietly siphoned through the soul tier like water through a hidden pipe. Inside the small world, Xianxia was waiting at the receiving end of the gate, her hands carefully taking the root clippings and instantly planting them into the rich, time-dilated soil beneath the family divine tree. Backed by the 10x time dilation and the tree's fortune, the extinct primeval plants began to take root within seconds, their green shoots bursting through the soil in a fraction of normal time. By the time the 12 hours concluded, Chen calmly walked out of the treasury gates, holding the 3 legally permitted jars in his hands for the enforcers to verify. "The items are correct. You may leave," the enforcer said, waving him through. The Grand Elders of the sacred ground immediately approached Chen, offering him high-ranking elder titles, massive palaces, and endless resources if he agreed to join their lineage as a core disciple. Chen bowed with deep respect, his face a mask of perfect humility. "The Grand Elder's grace is as vast as the sea. This junior is deeply honored. Please grant me 3 days to return to my ancestral village to pay respects to my late parents' graves. On the 4th day, I will return to the capital to swear my oath to the sacred ground." Moved by his filial piety, the Grand Elders readily agreed, providing him with a grand carriage and an elite token of passage. An hour later, the grand carriage exited the continental capital, heading toward the remote southern hills. The moment the carriage entered the illusion-covered territory of the Silent Lotus Valley, Chen stepped out of the vehicle, walked into the hidden cavern hall, and stepped cleanly through the silver spatial vortex. The vortex closed. Inside the primary alchemy palace of the small world, the clone sat down before Chen's main body, handed over the 3 legal jars, and went completely inert, its consciousness returning seamlessly to the main patriarch. The 4th day arrived, and then the 5th, and then a week passed. The sacred ground Grand Elders waited within their floating palaces, their faces turning from anticipation to impatience and finally to absolute rage. They deployed their Grade 3 Fate investigators, their star sovereigns, and their divine tracking arrays across every corner of the Ethelgard continent to find their missing champion. But they found absolutely nothing. Chen had completely vanished from the fabric of reality, leaving behind no karma, no bloodline trail, and 0 clues. The top alchemist prodigy of the 3,000 worlds had simply ceased to exist. Sitting in his quiet, mundane study back in Wang City, Chen quietly poured himself a cup of newly refined primordial lotus wine, listening to the distant birds chirping outside his window. A full 3 years had passed since he first bought this small house. Now his hidden world contained the only living orchard of extinct primeval plants in the universe. His family was multiplying in absolute paradise, and his path to becoming the supreme alchemy emperor had just secured its ultimate foundation, all while the entire upper world spent its days chasing a ghost. Chapter 17, The Second Generation's Ascent. The massive injection of primeval resources siphoned from the immortal realm's secret treasury initiated an era of unprecedented internal growth for the Yi clan branch. Within the safe, expanded 1,000 square kilometer parameters of the profound-grade small world. Another 5 hidden years of time-dilated isolation dissolved smoothly into the timeline. For the Hidden Dynasty, this internal period marked a critical generational transition. The first generation of children had reached their late 30s, their cultivation stabilizing at the peak boundaries of the mortal realms, while the second generation, the grandchildren of Chen, had grown into a fierce, highly advanced tier of young adults who were ready to begin their own formal ascents. Chen sat within the central ancestral hall, his presence now carrying the immense, reality-warping weight of the soul formation realm. Over the past 5 internal years, utilizing the primordial 9-leaf fire lotus and the ancient formulas he had extracted, his own soul had undergone a qualitative evolution, breaking through the mortal shackles to achieve an ageless, absolute dominance that few in the 3,000 worlds could ever dream of reaching. Before him stood his first son, Yi Chang, alongside his first grandson, Yi Tianfeng. Yi Chen's eyes scanned the young grandson, his probe interface flashing brilliant gold data. Descendant Yi Tianfeng, first grandson. Age 18 internal. Aptitude grade 6 spiritual root, ashen gold affinity. Cultivation peak of Qi refining. Loyalty 100. Tianfeng greets the Grand Patriarch. The young man knelt deeply, his voice crisp, his body radiating a sharp, metallic aura that indicated his profound talent for weapons smithing and combat. Rise, Tianfeng, Yi Chen said softly, his silver pupils reflecting the youth's stable foundation. Your father tells me you have completed the refinement of your first black iron core spikes without any assistance. Yi Chang stepped forward, his face filled with immense pride. At 39 years old internally, Chang's cultivation had reached the peak of the core formation, Kai Si realm, his smithing skills fully entering the grade 4 Grandmaster tier. Father, Tianfeng's affinity for metal is even purer than my own. He managed to smelt the 1,000-year divine iron on his first attempt using the flame talismans we mass-produced. Good, Yi Chen noted, a rare, gentle expression appearing on his face. A lineage is like a great river. It only remains pure if the water continues to flow with strength. Tianfeng, today you take your first step into the foundation establishment realm. I will personally protect your path. With a wave of his hand, Yi Chen opened a jade box containing a single, brilliant purple pill that floated in the air. A perfect-grade foundation establishment elixir, refined using the primeval herb components he had siphoned from the secret treasury. The young grandson swallowed the pill on the spot, sitting cross-legged at the center of the hall. Instantly, a massive, roaring vortex of golden, spiritual energy erupted around his body, pulling the dense laws of the small world directly into his dantian to form his internal spiritual pillars. Yi Chen stood by his side, his immense soul formation consciousness smoothly flattening any sudden energy spikes or meridian blockages, ensuring the breakthrough was as smooth as flowing water. Within 2 hours, a crisp ring of golden light expanded from the boy's body, stabilizing instantly at the first layer of the foundation establishment realm. Ding, first member of the second generation, has successfully achieved foundation establishment. Family fortune immensely reinforced. Host has received the Sovereigntier Alchemy Flame Inheritance, the Azure Mystic Void Fire. Yi Chen's heart thrummed with a deep wave of satisfaction as the ancient fire law knowledge integrated into his soul. The Azure Mystic Void Fire was a legendary, sentient cosmic flame that could burn away the impurities of any material within seconds, an absolute necessity for anyone attempting to refine high-tier pills leading to the Alchemy Emperor rank. With the second generation's ascent securely underway, Yi Chen withdrew his consciousness from the pocket dimension, returning to his physical frame inside the quiet, real-world study of his estate in Wang City. The outside world was quiet, but the air carried a subtle, heavy moisture that indicated a changing of seasons. A full 3.5 years had now passed since he first established this hidden branch. To the local citizens of Wang City, the quiet estate near the edge of the city was simply a wealthy, low-key residence that never caused trouble and occasionally donated grain to the local poor. Master, Qin Yao's voice drifted from the door as she entered with a fresh ledger. The unseen pavilion has completed its quarterly integration. Our total liquid spirit stones have surpassed 5 million low-grade stones and 200,000 high-grade stones. Keep the distribution steady, Qin Yao, Chen said, looking out the window at the peaceful city line. The world outside is entering a brief period of economic peace after the sacred grounds stopped their search nets. Use this quiet window to transition our main merchant proxies into the deeper sectors of the Ethelgard continent. We will need an even larger supply of raw iron and divine materials to arm our grandchildren. I obey your commands, Patriarch, she bowed elegantly. Chen let out a soft, silent breath, a calm, calculated glint in his eyes. His hidden base was expanding. His second generation of descendants was breaking through their mortal thresholds in absolute safety, and his personal mastery over the alchemical flames had just secured a legendary cosmic fire. Let the ancient masters of the upper worlds believe they ruled the sky. The true sovereign of the shattered firmament was quietly building his throne from the cradle of a minor mortal town. Chapter 18, The Shadow Across the Realm. The economic peace that the unseen pavilion had enjoyed across the prime continents began to fracture exactly 4 years after Chen first arrived in Wang City. While his family branch flourished within the safe parameters of the 1,000 square kilometer small world, a massive, unpredictable event erupted across the macrogeography of the shattered firmament, threatening to disrupt the stability of all 3,000 worlds. In the physical world, the sky over the Bastion province had turned an eerie, metallic gray color. High above the clouds, a massive, jagged tear in the spatial fabric had opened, a cosmic boundary leak caused by the sudden shifting of the ancient, shattered continent fragments that made up the universe. From that spatial tear, a dense, corrosive gray mist known as the void corruption began to seep downward, slowly poisoning the spiritual energy of the upper worlds and causing wild beast populations to mutate into frenzied demonic hordes. Chen stood on the roof of his outside study in Wang City, his silver pupils tracking the slow descent of the gray mist across the horizon. His advanced soul formation senses could feel the subtle, toxic impurities that were beginning to clog the natural energy lines of the province. The void corruption, Chen murmured, his voice cold and analytical. An environmental crisis. A threat that will force all the hidden sects and sacred grounds to activate their emergency storage arrays and lock down their local trade routes. Master, Qin Yao said, appearing by his side, her face tense. The local city lords have already issued an emergency martial decree. All independent merchant guilds must surrender 80% of their food and pill stocks to the regional military alliance to prepare for the mutated beast wave that is gathering in the Black Forests. Our proxy caravans have already been approached by the Bastion Military Integration Squad, Jai Jiyushin added, her tone sharp with frustration as she joined them. They demanded the immediate seizure of all Crescent Rice stores held within the unseen pavilion's provincial warehouses. Chen turned his gaze back toward the safety of his small world. Inside the pocket dimension, the space was entirely insulated from the outside corruption. The sky remained a rich amethyst color, and the family divine tree's protective pulse kept the air completely pure. They want to seize our stores to feed their regional armies. Chen let out a soft, chilling breath. We will give them nothing. But Master, Jai Jiyushin noted, if we refuse openly, the military alliance, which is backed by 3 mid-tier nascent soul sects, will designate the unseen pavilion as a rebel entity, deploying their integration armies to hunt down our proxies. Then we will eliminate their ability to project force, Chen commanded coldly, his mind instantly formulating a new defensive strategy. We will not fight them in the open light. We will use a grade 5 spirit-devouring plague barrier. With a wave of his hand, Chen opened the spatial rift and stepped into the small world. He walked directly to the primary refinement hall, where his first grandson, Yi Tianfeng, and his eldest children were waiting. Change, Tianfeng, prepare 60 sets of the custom black iron spirit armor, Chen ordered, his voice carrying an ironclad weight that instantly cleared their panic. Xianxia, assemble 30 elite maids who possess a loyalty rating of 100. We will deploy an invisible, automated defensive line along the 5 primary choke points surrounding Wang City. Chen spent the next 12 hours inside his time-dilated lab, refining 5 large, obsidian jars containing a highly specialized, alchemical gas known as the Ashen Void Poison. A substance he had brewed using the toxic clippings of the primeval plants combined with his newly acquired Azure Mystic Void Fire. This poison didn't kill instantly. Instead, it targeted the spiritual energy inside a cultivator's meridians. The moment an army marched through the invisible barrier, their dantians would violently lock up, their cultivation ranks temporarily reverting to the mortal qi refining level for a period of 3 months. That night, beneath the cover of the gray, corrupted fog, 30 elite maids, dressed in black armor, slipped out of the spatial rift, driving the obsidian poison jars deep into the mud of the 5 primary trade routes leading into Wang City. The next morning, a massive integration army numbering 3,000 elite warriors from the Regional Military Alliance, led by 2 early-stage nascent soul elders, marched toward Wang City to execute the asset seizure decrees. SHHH. The moment the army's vanguard crossed the invisible boundary lines 5 miles outside the city gates, a soft, odorless gray vapor rose from the grass. The soldiers didn't notice a thing until they tried to circulate their energy to clear the damp morning mist. Pudge! The 2 nascent soul elders suddenly gasped, their faces turning a horrific shade of purple as their massive spiritual avatars inside their souls were violently wrapped in chains of cold, restrictive alchemical ash. Their cultivation ranks collapsed instantly, plummeting from the legendary nascent soul realm straight down to the first layer of qi refining in less than 10 seconds. My dantian is sealed," one elder screamed, falling from his floating sword and landing face first in the mud. "The space is cursed. A high-tier poison master has anchored a forbidden zone here." The other roared in absolute psychological terror, his body trembling as he realized he was now no stronger than a mortal peasant. Panic ripped through the 3,000 elite warriors as they found their energies completely locked away, leaving them entirely defenseless against the mutated beast hordes that were howling in the distant forests. Terrified of a phantom expert who could cleanly castrate a nascent soul ancestor's power with an invisible breath, the army completely abandoned their weapons, turning around and fleeing back to their provincial capitals on foot. The shadow had tried to cross into Wang City, but it had only found an invisible wall of absolute alchemical suppression. Sitting in his quiet study, listening to the frantic reports of the local city guard, Chen calmly poured himself a fresh cup of earth-core spiritual wine. His town stayed clean, his family stayed safe, and his hidden empire continued its low-key rise to the apex of the shattered firmament completely undisturbed. Chapter 19, The Alchemy Emperor Formula. The failure of the Regional Military Alliance to breach the borders of Wang City solidified the small city's reputation as a forbidden zone across the geography of the Bastion province. Rumors spread like wildfire among the top sects that an ancient, eccentric grandmaster of alchemy and formations had chosen this minor mortal hub as his final retirement sanctuary, prompting every neighboring faction to permanently excise Wang City from their military maps. Inside the profound-grade small world, another 5 hidden years of time-dilated peace ground forward smoothly. For the Yi clan branch, this internal period marked the absolute apex of Phase 5, the Alchemy Emperor Formula. Chen sat cross-legged at the absolute center of the primary alchemy palace, his physical frame floating 3 feet in the air, completely enveloped in a blinding cocoon of bright blue flames, the Azure Mystic Void Fire he had refined to absolute perfection. Floating in the center of the blue fire was a massive, golden cauldron carved from pure astral star iron. Inside the cauldron, 48 rare primeval components, including the fully matured leaves of the primordial 9-leaf fire lotus, were being melted down into a single, dense sphere of liquid gold gaseous element. Chen was refining the Grade 4 Soul Ascension Elixir, the legendary pill formula he had siphoned from the immortal secret treasury that could bridge a soul formation master into the legendary enlightened sovereign tier, an elite rank that usually only existed within the high-tier holy grounds of the upper realms. His hands moved in a blur of complex macro-level mudras that caused the air inside the palace to fracture into tiny golden lotus petals. Boom! A massive, world-shaking explosion of pure spiritual law rocked the interior of the cauldron. A brilliant pillar of purple and gold light shot through the ceiling of the palace, slamming against the sky barrier of the 1,000 square kilometer small world, causing the entire pocket dimension to ring with a deep, melodic chime. From the cauldron, 3 round, glowing purple pills slowly drifted out, bearing 4 silver runic rings around their borders, the signature of absolute flawless grade for master craftsmanship. Ding, host has successfully refined a flawless grade 4 soul ascension elixir. Alchemy proficiency has formally crossed the mortal threshold, achieving the stable title of Grade 4 Alchemy Master, Path of the Alchemy Emperor unlocked. Chen opened his eyes, the blue cosmic fire violently drawing back into his pupils before leaving behind a look of supreme, unshakable power. He caught the 3 vials in his hand, his face remaining as cold and calm as winter stone. Achieved the Grade 4 Master level, Chen whispered, his voice carrying an ethereal weight that caused the stone floor to hum. The foundation of the Alchemy Emperor is finally solid. Father! Yichang rushed into the palace, his face pale with worry. At 44 years old internally, his frame was massive, his cultivation standing firmly at the peak of the core formation realm. The light pillar from your refinement. It almost breached the external concealment arrays. The energy density inside the lake has tripled in a matter of minutes. Do not panic, Chang, Chen said softly, his voice instantly flattening his son's anxiety. The external arrays are reinforced by the family divine tree. Not a single speck of this light has leaked into the outside world of Wang City. How are your siblings progressing? Yichang took a deep breath, collecting himself. Father, my sister Zixuan has successfully integrated the immortal leyline water into the northern fields. Our current store of crescent rice has surpassed 800 tons, all of the absolute top-tier quality. Furthermore, my eldest son Tianfeng has successfully achieved the 5th layer of the foundation establishment realm, leading the 2nd generation with flawless discipline. Chen nodded slowly, a deep sense of profound patriarch pride washing over him. In less than 5 years of physical outside time, he had taken a minor branch with 100 spirit stones and transformed it into a hidden, multi-generational dynasty that possessed an ageless soul formation patriarch, a peak core formation chief smith, 15 late foundation establishment children, and over 80 hyper-talented grandchildren, all armed with master armor and operating in an absolute paradise. You have all done well, Chen said, handing a pristine jade vial containing the newly refined elixir to his son. Take this. This is the earth core soul wine I fermented using the primeval lotus scraps. Drink a single cup before your next meditation. It will completely smooth away the final bottlenecks holding you back from condensing your own nascent soul. Yichang fell to his knees, his eyes filled with absolute religious tears as he accepted the vial. Chang, thanks the Patriarch, I swear to shield our lineage until my soul turns to ash. With the family's internal readiness standing at the absolute zenith of power, Chen closed his eyes and allowed his consciousness to return to his physical body in the physical world. Standing in his quiet, ordinary study in Wang City, looking out over the peaceful mortal streets where children were laughing and merchants were trading basic coins, Chen let out a soft, satisfied breath. A full 4.5 years had now dissolved into the grand timeline since he first stepped foot into this city. He had built an unshakable empire in the dark, siphoned the ancient secrets of the sacred grounds, and secured his path to the absolute apex of creation, all while remaining an unremarkable, low-key neighbor to the ordinary people outside his walls. Let the ancient star sovereigns and celestial courts rule their collapsing realms in the light. The hidden patriarch of the Yi clan was already standing behind them, an invisible, immortal shadow slowly preparing to claim the ultimate sovereignty over the entire shattered firmament. Chapter 20, The Sovereign's Dawn. The arrival of the 5th year since Chen first established his hidden branch in Wang City marked the absolute completion of the first grand era of the Yi clan dynasty. To the outer cosmos of the shattered firmament, the universe was a chaotic, bleeding canvas of regional wars, void corruption crises, and collapsing sacred grounds. But inside the ordinary, low-key courtyard near the edge of Wang City, The air carried nothing but the serene, unyielding peace of absolute victory. Inside the 1,000 square kilometer profound-grade small world, an incredible 50 hidden years of accelerated time had passed smoothly since the very first day the system had been activated. The original 65 women he had rescued from the Blossom Pavilion had all broken through their mortal thresholds, their lifelines extended by centuries under the protective canopy of the family divine tree. The first generation of children were now mature, wise elders in their early 50s internally, while the second generation, his grandchildren, numbered over 120 brilliant young men and women who formed a fully weaponized, self-sustaining army of hidden geniuses. Chen sat at the absolute apex of the central pavilion island, his physical body entirely weightless, floating 6 feet above the ground, surrounded by a serene, blinding aura of pure silver light that indicated his formal breakthrough to the legendary enlightened sovereign tier. He opened his eyes, his silver pupils scanning the vast, sprawling landscape of his pocket world. He could see the massive fields of crescent rice being harvested by his granddaughters under the guidance of Yi Zixuan. He could see the roaring volcanic forges where Yi Chang'e and Yi Tianfeng were hammering out grade 4 master weapons. And he could see the quiet western valley where the Chu twins stood waiting as his ultimate, silent executioners. A series of final, crisp system notifications flooded his mind, writing the conclusion to his first grand developmental cycle. Ding, family branch has reached the 5-year outside milestone. Total internal clan development, 50 years. Current clan population, 210 bound members, loyalty threshold, absolute 100. Hidden branch net liquid assets, 8,400,000 low-grade spirit stones, 400,000 high-grade spirit stones, and 3,500 tons of insulated spiritual food reserves. System status, absolute hidden dominance achieved within the local star sector. Chen let out a soft, long breath, a faint, rare smile finally touching his lips. He had done it. He had taken a broken life, a chaotic universe, and a dangerous system, and turned it into a masterclass of methodical, low-key calculation. He had never exposed his name. He had never fought a vanity war, and he had never allowed a single drop of his family's blood to be spilled on the altar of arrogant ambition. "Qin Yao, bring the wine," Yi Chen commanded softly, his voice carrying an ethereal resonance that echoed across the entire 1,000 square kilometer space. Qin Yao walked up the pavilion steps, her face as elegant and timeless as a jade statue, presenting a silver chalice containing 50-year-old primordial lotus wine. Yi Chen took the cup, raised it toward the amethyst sky, and then turned his gaze through the spatial vortex, looking out over the infinite layers of the 3,000 worlds, the immortal realm, the celestial courts, and the forbidden divine realm above them. The dawn of his sovereignty had arrived. He was no longer just a hidden patriarch hiding in a minor mortal city. He was an invisible, immortal foundation woven directly into the bedrock of the shattered firmament. No matter what wars shook the heavens outside, no matter what gods fell from the sky in the light, the Yi clan would remain here in the dark, larger, wealthier, and infinitely eternal. Yi Chen drank the cup in a single draught, his silver pupils flaring with a cold, absolute light as the spatial vortex silently closed behind him, locking his family away in perfect, everlasting peace.